Good afternoon, ladies, or actually good evening, and welcome to the council meeting for the City of Nanaimo for Monday, March 12, 2012, here at the Shaw Auditorium. And we'll start by calling the meeting to order and ask for an introduction of late items. Mr. Holmes.
Thank you, Your Worship. Replace item 4A to amend the wording of item 6B in the minutes of the regular meeting of council held 2012, February 27th. Add item 6C, delegations pertaining to agenda items, Ms. Jennifer O'Rourke regarding Lindley Valley West. Add item 6D, delegations pertaining to agenda items, Ms. Joanne Jonas-McRae regarding Lindley Valley West. Add item 6E, delegations pertaining to agenda items, Ms. Sally Ramsey regarding Lindley Valley West. Add item 6F, delegations pertaining to agenda items, Ms. Andrea Blakeman and Mr. Lawrence Reaper regarding Zoning Amendment Bylaw 2012, number 4500.014. Delete item 11H sub 2, staff reports, property maintenance bylaw 1990, number 3704, 250 Prideaux Street. Delete item 11I, staff reports, structural removal order 307-309, 5th Street, unauthorized suite in a duplex. Add item 17A, council appointments, community at-large appointments to advisory bodies, commissions, and boards. Add item 17B, council appointments, appointment of city representative to the Nanaimo Airport Commission. Add item 17C, council appointments, appointment of city representative to the Nanaimo Port Authority. Add item 17D, council appointments, appointment of city representatives to the Downtown Nanaimo Business Association Board. And I believe Councillor Paggi had an additional addendum.
Councillor Paggi, go ahead.
Thank you, Worship. I have a request from Mr. Norman Blatgersti of Mount Benson Development to be added under delegations pertaining to agenda items. Mr. Blatgersti emailed on Friday, and somehow his request did not end up on the schedule.
And you're moving that and seconded. All those in favor? Opposed? Motion carries.
Your Worship, with that addendum, then the Lindley Valley delegations will each have 5 minutes under the procedure bylaw.
Okay, 5 minutes each. Thank you. So we'll move into the adoption of the minutes.
So moved.
Moved and second. All those in favor? Opposed? Carried. And sorry. As amended. Yep. And the adoption of the agenda as amended. Did you move that? And you saying that?
As amended.
All those in favor? Opposed? Motion carries. So we got both the agenda and the minutes. He looks for a nod and he doesn't get it back. Oh, thank you. Okay, so we're going to move into presentations now, and staff to provide a PowerPoint presentation regarding the Transportation Master Plan. Welcome.
Your Worship, members of council, I'm absolutely delighted to be here to present to you the findings and the beginnings of the new transportation plan on behalf of staff and also the Transportation Advisory Committee. There's good works that are underway, and we are here to present the beginnings of the plan and to show you the process that will be followed. I'm here with my colleague, Mr. Gordon Foy, who is the transportation planning engineer for the city, and we will be discussing not only the impetus for this plan and its origins, but also the plan process into the spring, summer, and the end of the year. This is Nanaimo's first transportation plan, and it's a comprehensive plan that is citywide in nature. In fact, goes beyond our city borders because there are many people who live within, outside of the city limits, and it directly impacts our transportation networks. Plan Nanaimo identified the need for this plan because it recognized that as transportation, as population grew in Nanaimo, it would become a more important issue, a more complex issue that we would need to address in many different ways. And Plan Nanaimo also signaled that we would wanting to be looking at sustainable infrastructure and sustainable choices for transportation. So when we talk about sustainability, in this context, what do we mean? A lot of people use the word sustainability. From here, it means livability. How easy is it to get to work, to get to where you shop, to where you want to play? It also means what kind of impacts are your choices having on the environment? And it also means what is your ability to pay as a community for changes you might want to seek in your transportation infrastructure. Okay, I think I got ahead here. Transportation planners like to use words like mode shifts. They like to use words like reducing trip lengths and frequency. And this is all about changing the behavior of people. So how does that happen? How does that happen for us? Now, Plan Nanaimo did this by making a very important thing. It made the link between transportation planning and land use planning. It's a very important link. Mixed land use can mean you can live, work, and play in closer proximity, and your transportation choices would be very different to today. Also, Plan Nanaimo's choices for higher density along the transportation corridors in the future mean that we have more sustainable choices. And those could be, other than the single occupancy vehicle, more transit, more cycling, and more walking. Now, here are Plan Nanaimo's stated transportation goals in the OCP. And this is where we started to build our plan. We looked at improving our options. We looked at having our origins and destinations closer. This is where we started to talk about more transit, more walking, and more cycling. It also includes the fact that land uses are part of this plan. What's in a transportation plan? Well, first of all, it's strategic in nature, and it must be longer than our one-year budget horizon or even our 5-year capital planning horizon. And it's not just about infrastructure and spending for infrastructure, it's about those policies that reflect the city's interests and the city's values. It takes into account other city policies and objectives. Here again, we're looking at expanding transit and active transportation and responding to other challenges that the city faces, whether they be environmental or other. Transportation plan, here, this is where we are today, and I like this graphic because it represents graphically the size, relatively speaking, in terms of how many people use the car. You can see the car dominates. These are all the modes of transportation graphically, and in 20 years from now, this is where we would prefer to be. Here we have less domination of the car. It's still a big factor, but more transit, more walking, more cycling, etc. Here are the elements of a transportation plan, of an atypical transportation plan, and we will be addressing most of these, if not all of these elements. You can see I've already spoken about biking, pedestrian, and transit, but it also takes into account things such as good movements and a parking plan. Now, tonight, we are going to be concentrating the rest of our presentation on the part outlined in yellow on that graphic, which is data collection and tool development. So this is the first part of our plan, and I will come back and talk about how data collection will proceed and how it fits into the remainder of the plan. So Gordon's going to come up here and talk about this section.
Please.
Good evening. So where we are now, spring 2012, basically wanted to walk you through what's going to be happening in the next 2 to 3 months in terms of the transportation plan. We're still in the preparation phase. We're still getting our ducks in a row and getting organized in terms of getting out to do a planning process later this year. But what we want to do this spring is effectively collect a good set of information to build a base of which to build the plan off. And all good plans are based on a good understanding of current conditions. We need information to assess our future performance. How in 5 to 10 years, someone will want to come back and see how they're doing then and how we were doing now and compare that and help them understand how much progress they've made in that period and how successful our plan has been. And it also allows us to assess different scenarios when we go into the planning process, so that when we get a variety of ideas, which we will, about where perhaps as a community we want to go as far as transportation, that we have the right tools and the right information to assess those different scenarios and understand which ones would be most beneficial in getting towards our goals and objectives. So just graphically, the same general idea. We're out to basically form a snapshot of transportation in Nanaimo in 2012. And part of that process started last year with the collection of the 2011 census, which gave us an update on population, employment, and other sort of key demographic factors. This spring, we're out collecting information on transit, pedestrians, cyclists, and doing surveys with other transportation user groups. And the long-term objective of this work is effectively to build a better plan and deliver more effectively on the objectives of the OCP and other objectives that make it into the planning process. The first and probably the most important survey that we're going to do is something called a household travel survey. And the household travel survey will involve randomly selecting households throughout the city of Nanaimo and adjoining areas, and asking each household to, through a telephone survey, to report out on what their travel was over the last 24 hours. The objective of that survey is to help us understand at a neighborhood and community level how we're traveling as a collective whole, how what's the characteristics of each neighborhood's travel behavior, what's the characteristics of Nanaimo's travel behavior as a community. So it really tells us the why, how, where to of how our residents are traveling. And many other cities have done this. Kamloops, Vernon, Kelowna, they've all done this within the last couple of years. Victoria and Vancouver have been doing this for the last several decades and have done multiple iterations of this. The CRD just completed their travel diary, a household travel survey this fall, and they're actually just processing their information right now. So the timing of that study is mid-March, attempting to finish by May. The study area is just south of the Nanaimo Airport to just north of Lantzville. And the sample target size is about 1,450 households, which represents about 3% of all households in that area. The survey would be conducted by a firm called R.A. Malatest and Associates. They're based out of Victoria. They'll run the survey out of their Victoria call center, and they have a lot of experience across Canada doing these types of surveys, and in fact just completed the CRD survey, so they're very well set up and organized for this, and they know what they're doing. Ultimately, we're trying to attempt to estimate all of the current trips within the city, regardless of the mode of transportation, regardless of how you do it or why you do it, and really understand what's happening today. Then, in addition to that more general holistic survey, we have a number of targeted surveys that are going to look at very specific portions of the transportation network and try and give some measurement to what's happening, again, in current conditions. The timing of these are February to May, so some of them are already underway. We're already doing some traffic counts. You might have noticed around town that there's a few extra rubber hoses across the road. That's the sort of initial phases of that work, something that we do on a common basis, so we started that work already. Some of the traffic counts will be manual in nature to capture things like cyclists and pedestrians and other road users that we can't collect from automatic count stations. We'll look at transit, so we'll be looking at both at ridership by route and by route segment, and we'll also be asking transit riders to give us some information about their trips. Where are their trips starting? What routes are they using? Where are they exchanging? And where's their final destination? And that's just to help understand sort of the nature of their trips. RDN, Transit, and BC Transit are supporting us in both those surveys and helping us through that part of the work. We're looking at an external gateway survey. The purpose of this work is to effectively understand what's happening to trips that are passing through Nanaimo but aren't Nanaimoites. We know that people arrive south of the airport and they depart out Parksville direction, but we don't really understand what the proportion of the traffic on the parkway is related to that as opposed to our internal trips. And that survey is attempting to understand some of those patterns. And then finally, similarly for ferries, a survey on the 3 ferry routes coming into town. We're looking for information of where's your origin, where's your destination, trip purpose, how do you get to terminals, and is there a potential for you to maybe use a more sustainable mode of transportation to connect at either end of your ferry trip? And that might be capturing trips that, like people that are taking a bus in Nanaimo, transferring, and then taking a bus in Vancouver, or other trips that are taking the car the whole way. So the main message here is that we're going to be doing a fair bit of work in the next 2 or 3 months. It's preparatory. It's all preparing to get ourselves organized for our plan later this year so that we have a good common base of data. And if you're out there either walking, biking, cycling, taking the bus, driving your car, it's like you're going to encounter some of this survey work, and just so that people are generally aware of it and know what it's about. So I'm going to give it back to Susan, and she's going to...
Okay, we'll just see if there's any questions from council so far on the one. Though maybe before you go, I'm just going to ask this external gateway survey that you're suggesting, if it's south of the airport and north of Lanceville, is that going to be taken right on the main highway, or will people be given an opportunity to pull over, or how is this going to be conducted?
The external gateway survey will be done at those locations. It is on the main highway. What we'll be doing is identifying individual cars as they go by. And the way we do this is by recording a part of their license plate and either a color, or just a type of vehicle, so truck with a portion of the license plate. The purpose of that is that so that when we see that same vehicle 30 minutes later pass through the station, let's say you caught that vehicle initially at Lanceville and you see it out at the airport, then you have a sense of the relationship between those two stations. You may find that maybe only 20% of traffic is passing through. So that's... But
I was thinking the security items and the privacy issues will be addressed, obviously, by doing it that way.
So that's part of the reason that we actually don't want to actually collect the whole piece of information. What we want is we just want enough information to make the match. It's theoretically possible that you may find cars that have the same last 2 digits, but that's okay. It's an acceptable error.
Okay. We do have a couple of other questions. Councillor Patchy.
Thank you, Worship. My question is actually to Ms. Clift, if you don't mind, Gordon. Thank you very much for your presentation. In your presentation, I noticed that you are talking about a master plan that is to serve 5, 10, 20 years. And in the subsequent presentation, you're talking about 5 or 10 years. I'm kind of missing 10 years between the two of you. Could you explain that?
It's 20 years for the model. Why don't you answer that?
Yeah, I think the clarification there is that the Transportation Master Plan definitely should extend sort of what I would say 5 short-term, 10 medium-term, and 20 long-term years worth of ideas. And there's probably going to be a collection of strategies that sort of match into those timeframes. The data that we collect today or over the next couple months definitely has a shelf life. Mm-hmm. It will be very good for us for the next 5 years. And then after a while, it will, there'll be sort of the need to renew that set of data. And I think that's where that 5 to 10 years comment comes from.
May I have a follow-up, Your Worship, to Ms. Clift? You talked in your presentation about, I just saw parking mentioned on one side slide. And obviously parking is a very important part of this whole equation. And when you talk about data collection, I can't help but have my thoughts go to the hospital neighborhood where parking is at a critical point and where data collection at this point is not going to serve a whole lot of a purpose. How does that fit in with this master plan?
The
parking piece of the plan will not be addressed in terms of data collection in this spring. So I think that answers that question for you, but it will be part of what we do next. I actually just wanted to show one more slide.
Sure.
Which really, Gord was talking about data collection, and we wanted to make sure you're aware that was happening today, because we do know that the citizens of Nanaimo will be actively engaged in this, and they will be asking you questions. But beyond the data collection phase, we will be talking about, we will be doing public consultations, a very formal process, and it will be starting in the fall. And we will be coming back at that point to talk to council about what that consultation process looks like. We will likely be talking a lot more about parking then in that phase.
Final follow-up, Your Worship. That's all good and well, and I accept that. But the hospital area has been a very difficult area for residents as it is. And, I really would like to get a bit of a timeline on when we can start talking about alleviating some of those very serious problems there.
Do you want me to talk about that?
Mr. Swaby?
Mr. Swaby.
Your Worship, through to Councillor Paggi. The hospital area is an area for parking that we will be looking at this year. We'll start our data collection as well, and we'll be liaisoning with all the major players in the neighborhood, starting with VHA to find out their plans, because yes, we recognize that there's some issues with parking, and we'll be starting to investigate that this year with a plan likely in the next year.
Thank you.
Councillor Bestwick.
Thank you, Worship. This question is for Gordon or Susan. Thank you very much. In your presentation, you mentioned alternative modes of travel to be researched in the transportation master plan, the hows, the wheres, the surveys, the data research and examination. My question is, will the E&N railway corridor form part of the research process as an alternative mode of transportation from, hypothetically, Extension to Lanцeville on that spine for looking out 5, 10, 15, and however many years into the future?
We certainly are in a position to investigate the use of that rail line as part of an alternate mode of transportation. And one of the things we did talk about at the Transportation Advisory Committee meeting, as you're aware, Councillor Bestwick, was putting that into our model to see what kind of impact it would have on the other modes of transportation. It certainly is something we can investigate, and we're expecting that it will come up in the identification of key issues part of this project.
Thank you, Your Worship. Just a follow-up response. Yes, I'm acutely aware of that, asking that question, and what I consider to be its importance and significance, but the members of the community that weren't in that room may not be as aware and or as familiar with that question moving forward. So given that we're in a position to include that, to make that inclusive, then I would look forward to that becoming a part of the Transportation Master Plan survey and data that we collect for the future.
I think the critical component there is whether or not the federal government's going to step in and match the provincial grant. The province of British Columbia has granted $7.5 million, subject to matching by the federal government. We understand from our MP that it's still in the works. That is yet to be seen. But if it is, that's an excellent question, because we would like to involve it if we will. If we do have a train service, let's get it part of the transportation plan too. Councillor Johnstone.
Thank you, Your Worship. I was going to ask the same question about the ENN because I didn't see it on your model of where we are now and where we're going to be in the future, Susan. But what about rail, inner city rail in the future? Trolleys and the like.
The way that we're looking at rail at this point is is an option, and it becomes a sub-option whether you go with the ENN rail or some other form of rail. And it would depend on where we decided we had our desire lines and where our concentration of places to work and places to live are going to be in the model going out 10, 15, and 20 years. So the answer to that is unknown at this point, and I think that we need to build our transportation model a little more robustly. We're just starting it now in order to figure out whether one is a better idea than the other.
Your Worship, we do know that it takes a lot of density and a lot of population to make inner-city rail work, and my opinion is that we're a long way from that.
Okay, Councillor Kip.
Well, thank you, Your Worship. My opinion is we might be closer. They're just different types of trains. This is a really important focus for us, I believe, and it's going to help us where we're going to move in the future, how we're going to look, how our community is going to grow. I want people to understand that they will be getting robocalls, but they will be identified. I got to get that in. People will be getting called. They will identify, and please participate. I know it's tough sometimes if you get a call or you get stopped to ask, but give the information. It's important for our community. And like I say, if we can get the transportation both external to internal traffic, external to external, figure out where our traffic's moving, how our logistics are coming into town, it's going to really help for the future. I think it's important. It's going to be a great strategy, so I hope people will support it.
Good point. Thank you, Ms. Clift. Is that the end of it there, too? And Gordon, thank you very much. Good presentation. Do you want to motion to receive the presentation here? And second, all those in favor? Opposed? Motion carries. And we'll move into delegations pertaining to agenda items, unless it's on the same subject, which would be the issue dealing with Lindley Valley. The other delegations would be allowed up to 10 minutes, Lindley Valley 5. Is there any delegations now that want to speak pertaining to the 2012-2016 financial plan? It is now.
Thank you. My name is Janet Irvine, 609 First Street in Nanaimo. And I realize you're giving people 10 minutes regarding delegations to the financial plan, and right now I'll just concentrate on one issue that I have in mind. The financial plan bylaw to confirm and adopt the financial plan is on this evening's agenda for adoption. As you are open to hearing delegations pertaining to it, I am using the opportunity, even though I am aware that a majority of you are in support of it, and that it will, no doubt, be adopted this evening. I believe that the community charter provides that you have until May the 15th to adopt the bylaw, so I'm wondering why Council feels that it has to be adopted tonight. In my online comments of March the 9th, in response to Ron Boland's column of that date in the Nanaimo Daily News, I referred to a CFAX news editorial that I had heard on March the 6th. The editorial advised that Victoria City Council had been warned that its annual spending practices are not sustainable, and that the Finance Department would be presenting options, quote, for permanent reductions to programs and services, quote, in the city, and that the city could not afford to carry on business as usual. It advised that the City of Victoria's Governance and Priorities Committee refused to approve this year's operating budget before hearing a detailed presentation from the Police Department on its funding request. I'm aware that RCMP Inspector McPhail did make a presentation to you regarding higher service level request, but as the proposed new RCMP contract has not yet been ratified with the province, I'm wondering how you've made allowance for this higher service level request. I don't know if this is the time to have the question answered or not.
Well, we can, and maybe Mr. Kenny might have a view on it too. There are several parts to the question, but first of all, the RCMP contract has not been signed yet. I think it's imminent. The signature's almost there. A lot of the financial implications, individual ones, are done at the municipal level. So staffing requirements are normally done locally. It's superintendent. The superintendent would come to us with a list, a wish list, if you want, of what he'd like to see in the way of additional members, and then council deliberates over that and makes a decision on how many of the number he's looking for that we can financially support. But that's done. That certainly isn't done provincially or federally. That would be done at the municipal level.
I was just wondering how the city makes allowance when they don't have the details of the new contract.
Well, I don't know that we have made final decisions on it yet. Remember that the city does not negotiate the contract. The province of British Columbia, in our case, negotiates for us with Ottawa. And so the two of them make that. You may have seen the paper. There's a little bit of communication.
Yes, thank you. I understand
particle
that.
We're looking for.
Yes.
But I received a number of calls today about it, and I have a call from the Deputy Attorney General making a little bit more clarity. They're going to get back to me tomorrow on it. But as I say, I don't see, they approve the big picture between the province and the federal government, and then the municipalities normally still work out all the financial aspects that are local in nature. The number of constables required in Nanaimo certainly might be entirely different from Powell River or some other area. So there isn't a formula that's unique province-wide. It's done individually in each location.
So I would just
would add to the delegation that the financial plan that Council is considering tonight is based on the assumption that the major financial parameters in the agreement on the RCMP are unchanged. If there are substantial changes, then we would make amendments to the next version of the budget.
And I think if I can, that was the component that I was concerned about that was in the media, that we're moving along, and you're absolutely right on the budget, but we do need to know if there are any surprises. We're told there probably will not be, but probably, and there's always a little bit of a concern. In any event, you were asking about approving the budget tonight, and then it goes on for, and this is normally done, and Mr. Kenny may want to add, or someone on council may want to add, but normally this is done to give staff a direction as we move ahead towards the final date, May 15th. We do approve it, and there's been, I think, 2, maybe 3 approvals so far this spring on it, and there'll be possibly one tonight, and then there'll be at least one more by May 15th. There may be one in April as well, but all we're trying to do is indicate to staff and to the satisfaction of members of council that the direction we're on is consistent with what they see too.
So for clarification purposes, if you do adopt the financial plan bylaw this evening,
it still has to be approved again.
Are you saying that it could...
It's approved to date, in effect.
And the budget could increase at a later date?
The budget could change at a later date.
Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you. Oh, Councillor Bestwick, sorry, did you have something for this delegation?
I just understood Ms. Irvine's question to be how and what allowance has been made should the new RCMP contract come back with a significant increase that would impact our budget. That's what I understood her question to mean, and I'm not sure if she left with that answer. So if in fact the RCMP contract comes back with significantly higher, or proportionally higher, how we've protected that increase in our budget. That's what I understood the question to be, and I'm not sure if staff responded specifically to that question.
The answer, as far as staff are concerned, is that we've prepared the budget, the financial plan, based on the current conditions in the contract. If there are increased costs, they're not provided for, and we would have to address that in the next version.
Thank you.
Okay, I see no further questions. So are there any other delegations that wish to speak to matters concerning the 2012-2016 financial plan?
Robert Fuller, 3350 Hammond Bay Road. During the past few months, other citizens as well as myself of Nanaimo have spoken to Council on the financial plan and budget that will guide us into the near future. I'm sure you've listened to our views on the burden that the tax and fee increases will place on many individuals in this city. Most citizens are cognizant of the fact that more than one of the people that sit on council were elected for their platforms of fiscal responsibility, openness, and transparency, and to listen to the views of the electorate. We can truly only hope that some of you will stick to these ideals and proceed on that mandate. That being said, there also seems to be a bit of backtracking on some of those ideals. The budget itself appears to be growing rather than shrinking, and with it, the burden to taxpayers only gets more difficult. Municipal operating spending is starting to get out of control. One need only to read the publication from the Canadian Federation of Independent Businesses 2011 report. The latest report shows that municipal operating spending, adjusted for inflation, has risen nearly 4 times the rate of population growth. As well, in a column in the Victoria Times Colonist written on March the 7th, spending from capital programs is being cut back just to keep the tax increase to 3.5% in Victoria. It seems in that city most things are on the chopping block, from new bus shelters, maintaining park benches and trails, and even one councillor has wondered whether, rather than paring back capital programs, that savings couldn't be found in management salaries. Let's hope this doesn't happen here. Perhaps an independent core review is overdue. Council should also be looking creatively at new sources of revenue to alleviate the burden of rising tax rates on the citizens of Nanaimo. And as such, we should not be giving away extremely over-generous exemptions and the possibility of attracting business to this city, only for that to suit the agenda of a few people. We've tried that before and the citizens lost their shirts on that one. In closing, as a council elected to serve the citizens of Nanaimo's best interests, I am sure that collectively or privately you've been brainstorming as how to lessen the burden of residential tax rates and fees upon us. As such, I would like to ask you what recommendations perhaps you have been making on this financial plan before it is approved. Now, I can go back and sit down if you want to answer my question.
No, we've got Councillor Bestwick. Go ahead.
Thank you, Worship. Thank you, Mr. Fuller. I think that you have been a regular attendee of our council meetings over the last several years, and in most recent years, I think that there's been a clear indication that a core services review, as you made reference to, is something that is of interest to many, and something that I think that is important, that we'll continue to advocate for a core services review. We had one just most recently on our contracting in or out services, and I think a independent core services review is something that will continue to be a topic of discussion in the interests of defining where potential opportunities, such as you make reference to, exist. And I can tell you that I will continue to advocate for a core services review of our city's operations.
Mr. Fuller, maybe I can ask you a question. Tonight on the agenda, one of the items that will be discussed is the Lindley Valley.
Sure.
And that will be start at $6 million and go up from there. I don't know if we've got a final figure. What's your position? Do you support spending that?
Remember, I fully support.
Let me finish. I listened to you very carefully.
Okay.
Every $800,000 is 1% on our taxes. Every $800,000. So here we're talking $6 million to $10 or $12 million. So I'm just kind of curious. You're saying council's not doing this and council's not doing that, but one of the challenges we have is that every single council meeting we have a huge group of people coming before us wanting wanting us to spend more money. I'm not for a minute questioning the value of the projects. I think they're all great, but there's just a finite amount of money, as you point out. So the balance is, and unfortunately, you can't start off the year and say, we're not going to listen to another delegation, we're not going to make another financial commitment, that's it for the rest of the year. We could do that. But the problem is, they come week after week after week with more requests, and we have, as a council, have to balance that all out with what the community needs are and what the community will support. It's not easy, and that's the challenge, and tonight's another example of a very, very large financial commitment that's coming back before council. That's the dilemma that we're in. It's not an excuse, it's just the reality of it. Councillor Patchy.
Thank you, Worship. Thank you, Mr. Fuller. I just want to explain to you why it is that I agree with the city manager's preamble to the 2012-2016 financial plan as this year being a maintenance, a status quo budget more than anything else. There are some things that I would agree with you including the very last addition to the budget that I would like to have seen differently, but that's now a policy that the council has adopted and is part of it. I also want you to remember that we are in the process of, and I think a very important process, to minimize the industrial tax so that in 2 years from now we'll have residential, commercial and industrial at, if I'm not mistaken, 2.3 for all three of them. I think it is really important that we place ourselves in that kind of a position so that we can work with the new Economic Development Corporation and hopefully try to attract some business that will provide the jobs that we desperately want, all of us. So a bit of short-term pain for long-term gain as far as I'm concerned. I don't like it any more than you do to have this placed on the backs of residential taxpayers, but that is the reality as I see it right now.
Well, the simple fact is I'm looking at what's coming out of Victoria right now, and it doesn't look like fun.
I'm sure it isn't, but then we're not Victoria. Victoria does not have the industrial base that we want.
Lord, I hope we don't get that way.
And we'll try. We'll do our best.
Okay, sir. Thank you very much. Now, is there anyone else that would like to speak to matters related to the 2012-2016 financial plan? Welcome, sir.
Gord Fuller, 604 Nichols Street, and I just want to reiterate that when you do adopt this financial plan tonight, which I have no doubt you're going to, sadly, that you remember the taxpayers not only are those that actually own the properties in Nanaimo, but they are the people that rent the properties in Nanaimo who face getting their rents increased by every tax increase that you do. Many of these people live in poverty already. Many are facing foreclosures on mortgages, and while it doesn't seem like a lot, that can push them over the edge. Councillor Pache mentioned that certain things, and I believe he was referring to the communication manager, are now part of the budget. They become policy. They've been adopted, but those things can be changed. I mean, we're going to witness a change tonight, likely with regards to Lindley Valley. So they are not set in stone at this point. Once the budget is adopted, then they are. Reiterations and new versions of the budget, my understanding that the next new version of the budget will be in 2013. So really think carefully that if you pass this tonight, I mean, we are in an economic crunch right now. And there is no way out of it by increasing budgets. Increasing budgets will simply hurt. And they will hurt everyone, not just the ones that own the properties, but those that can least afford to be hurt. Thanks.
Okay, sir. Thank you. Now, anyone else like to speak to matters related to the 2012-2016 financial plan? And hearing none, we'll move into the next delegation, Ms. Hildy Schlosser. And Ms. Schlosser is the Executive Director, Central Vancouver Island Multicultural Society. Welcome. I believe you're going to make a declaration for us, or we will make one for you, possibly.
I hope so. Your Worship, members of council. March 21st is the International Day for the Elimination of Racial Discrimination. And it's a very important day around the world and in the city here. And yes, we have requested that the city proclaim the day on behalf of Nanaimo. But elimination of racial discrimination is work that we carry out every single day in all of the work that we do. Many of you are familiar with some of our very visible events that are focused on anti-racism or diversity and welcoming communities, our interfaith projects, our dialogues, multicultural dialogues, all of our diversity partnership work, and in fact the city has signed on as a diversity partner and has worked beside us on some of our initiatives. However, what many of you don't realize, and what many of the citizens in the community don't realize, is the other work that we do that is on behalf of elimination of racism, yes, indirectly maybe, and it is really, really deep and focused on social and economic integration of immigrants. We play a very important role not only in the current economic environment, but in the future of the economy in Nanaimo. Quoting from Sunday's Globe and Mail, in her current jobs plan, Premier Clark expects BC's economy to grow by 1 million jobs over the next decade, and a third of those jobs will need to be filled by immigrants. We began in 1979 as a typical grassroots, registered charity nonprofit organization, maybe one staff, a few volunteers, welcoming refugees and immigrants and helping them get adjusted to the community. We grew a bit over the years, but as a result of a phenomenal growth in the past 8 years, we've increased 5 times in size. We now have 23 full-time staff, 4 part-time, 2 contract workers, occasional interns and practicum placements, and approximately 80 volunteers. And they don't all run the events that we look after. They run many of the direct services that we provide. Services not usually visible to the community, but highly visible to those who receive them and the people that we work with in the community to assist them or to benefit from immigrants who come here. Our services are designed to attract and retain immigrants. When I say attract, I mean that we've been part of a provincial initiative for years now to encourage regional immigration patterns, for immigrants to move not into the MTV, Montreal, Toronto, Vancouver areas, but to other communities and municipalities around the country and around the province. Smaller communities that need immigrants as much as the large cities do, and maybe more. We do some of this attraction work by linking strongly with CIC and their website, with the Welcome BC provincial website, by sitting on provincial boards, committees, advisories, by meeting with ADMs, DMs, and ministers, by representing the interests of Nanaimo and the unique patterns of immigration to this community, of which we are quite well-versed. We respond to emails from overseas and answer questions, encouraging people to move to this community. We put out publicity at Vancouver Airport, at CAN, the Community Airport Newcomers Network. And we ensure that we have the services that immigrants need when they get here. So once they get here, our services are designed to retain immigrants, to help them adapt, adjust, and become part of the fabric of our community. 95% of our budget is in government contracts, which have been secured through the RFP bidding process. The goal of the government in providing services to immigrants is to ensure that they adapt, integrate, and become contributing members of society as quickly as possible. Statistics show that it takes 5 to 8 years for immigrants to adapt and 10 years before they feel like they're home. In the past 8 years, the focus on immigrant services has become more and more that of immigrant attachment to the labor market, or simply put, helping immigrants get jobs, especially jobs commensurate with their training and experience. In the past year, and actually for a number of years prior to this, 50% of the immigrants that we serve have arrived either under skilled worker, provincial nominee, or investment class. That's a really large number for a community our size, 50%. Yet we know that the unemployment rate among immigrants is double the average. Not to mention those highly skilled immigrants who are working in survival jobs, dishwashing, cleaning, delivering pizza, and driving taxis. There are few entities, if any, in this city or region that actually make a concerted effort to change this situation. This is what we do. We're all about immigrants and creating a welcoming, inclusive community so they will want to stay here. Right now, every one of our programs, from settlement to ESL to employment services, and even our welcoming and inclusive communities and workplaces program, has a strong labor market component. Not just in working with immigrants to be job ready in Canada, but also in working with employers to create a workplace that is open to diversity of culture and ethnic origin and inclusive of everyone. When a new immigrant first arrives here, we start the process of working with them, which generally lasts 3 to 5 years, depending on language, country of origin, and ability to find meaningful work. We begin by assisting them to learn about and navigate our customs, systems, culture, laws, and norms. From basic everyday issues, registering children in school, understanding our medical systems and applying for MSP, renting a home and understanding tenancy laws, buying a house or a car, getting a driver's license, taking a bus, using our banking systems, shopping, knowing how to read street signs, understanding utilities, and on and on. As their journey continues, the topics become more complex. RSPs, legal systems, taxation system, getting citizenship, ICBC, emergency preparedness, being power smart, home insurance, and on there. Our English classes, levels 1 to 3, are theme-based for daily living, and our levels 4 to 7, we're about to get level 6 and 7, are designed for working in Canada. We work with the community and with employers to help immigrants become attached to the labor market. We introduce clients to other existing services and agencies, government and non-government, and teach them how to access them. We educate and support other services in serving immigrants. We help them understand cross-cultural communication and providing cultural information. We support the school district's multicultural and settlement programs. And in employment, we have 5 employment programs, 3 immigrant-specific, 1 mainstream that is highly suited to immigrants, and 1 program that supports employers in providing training for existing staff, immigrant or non-immigrant. We help immigrants get their credentials recognized or assessed. We teach them about payroll systems, workplace culture, language of the workplace, EI, employer expectations, resume writing and interviewing in Canada, which is not the same as it is in many countries. We teach immigrants about the importance of having soft skills, which 60% of our employers look for in Canada. We bring employers into our agency to offer trade talks, to let our clients know what it's like to work in their environment. We collaborate extensively with employers to help them create inclusive workplaces. We developed the Safe Harbor program in 2004, which received a national award. went provincial and now national. We have diversity savvy training. We have a website with diversity tools for agencies and employers. And we provide job coaching on both sides for employers and employees to integrate immigrants into the workforce. So yes, it is the International Day for the Elimination of Racial Discrimination. And in very practical terms, in Nanaimo, we're doing that every day, and we're doing it so it really makes a big difference to all the immigrants that come here.
Thank you, Ms. Losser. We have one question from Councillor Patchy.
Thank you, Worship. Thank you, Ms. Losser, for the amazing amount of work that you do. When you rattle all that off, I don't know how you do it with 20 people. As you know, I had the pleasure a couple of weeks ago to help moderate a faith-based organization organized by yourself in order to get a little bit more cooperation going between the faith-based groups where it connects to housing and homelessness and employment. It was just an amazing experience, so thank you for that. Since we are on the subject of racism, I want you to tell me as plain as you can, is there in Nanaimo?
Is there in Nanaimo? Yes. Is it highly visible? No. It's under the table in many instances, though people who directly are affected by racism wouldn't say so, probably. They may feel it more directly than you or I looking at it from the outside. But it definitely exists, and it exists in every community across the country. We like to think of ourselves as being more open, but we still have an awful lot of work to do in that regard.
Thank you.
Councillor McKay.
Thank you, Your Worship. To the delegation, Mr. Losser, thank you very much for your presentation, and I'm fully supportive of the proclamation. I'm curious about your presentation relative to the credentials and certification. I know both levels of senior government are very eager to increase the immigration to Canada. Can you tell me how your efforts are going relative to recognizing the certification that they may have? We've got doctors and teachers and scientists and engineers and marine captains and so on and so forth doing, as you call, the get-by jobs because they can't get recognition for their certifications.
Well, there are actually about 440 regulating bodies in Canada, some provincial, some national, and some of the provincial ones don't agree with each other either. So the best we can do is we can submit an immigrant's paperwork, all of their credentials that they bring, that we have to get them to send for from their home country, and sometimes it takes months. We submit them for assessment, and when they come back, and in most cases find very disappointingly that they are not going to be recognized in Canada, then we sit down with them and we look at the options. What is it that they need? What are the gaps in their training, in the requirement? Is it realistic to pursue those gaps, to take some retraining, to go back to school and start again in some cases? Or do they want to move sideways? Are they prepared to invest another 10 years in their education? Or are they thinking, well, maybe I'll take the resources I brought with me and I'll open a little business, or I'll do something else that might not give me the status and the income that I had at home, but will still provide a good life here in Canada and make my family happy.
Thank you.
Councillor Anderson.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you for making your presentation today as well. The first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to answer Councillor Patchy's question and saying that I believe there is racism in Nanaimo. For me, I remember we were just in Duncan a week ago for their 100th anniversary, and a question that I get quite often is, where are you from? And but no, a lot of the time where I go, people will ask, where are you from? And I do have to say I'm from Nanaimo. I can use an example from the post office that I used to work at, and that this woman asked, "Oh, where are you from?" And I said, "Oh, Nanaimo." "No, really, where are you from?" was her response. And Councillor Patchy then asked the individual, "Oh, how come you didn't ask where I'm from?" And he's like, "Oh, well, you're from Nanaimo, aren't you?" So I believe it does exist in this city. And for the individuals who wonder where I'm from, I can show you my birth certificate, unlike some other individuals. But no, and I just want to say thank you for all the work that the Multicultural Society does, because I know in my family immigrated here in the late 80s. That was one of the places that they actually stopped, so I do thank you for that help. I was born in Canada, but they did come with my 2 older sisters and brothers, so I may not actually be sitting here had it not been for the Multicultural Society and the help that you gave my family, so I say thank you for that. And one of the questions I do have is the elimination of racial discrimination. What does the Multicultural Society do for individuals in the community who may feel that they may have either hate crimes or feel that they've been discriminated against by coming to the Multicultural Society?
Well, we try and help them assess the situation, talk to them about the course of action that they want to take, look at the options that they have available to them, whether it's a human rights issue, whether it's an issue they would like to address themselves. So we offer them support in that way, or how to get legal advice. We can do some mediation if they want that with the individual, the business, or whoever it is that they feel has discriminated against them. And of course, in the larger picture, the safe harbor, we have trained 135 safe harbors in this community to be welcoming and inclusive workplaces and businesses. That's what we try and do.
Thank you.
Councillor Johnstone.
Thank you, Your Worship. Hildy, a question about the immigration of the Mexican people into Vancouver Island and Nanaimo. Last night I was appalled to watch a program on CBC News about the fact that this continent is building a wall all across the state of Arizona to eliminate the people that are trying to escape, the warlords and the drug lords of Mexico. And 900 a month are trying to escape, and over 200 a month are dying in their efforts to escape, which me as a humanitarian found very, very appalling and very upsetting. Do we get requests from Mexico for people to come to Nanaimo?
Well, we do have a number of immigrants every year from Mexico. Let me just see, I've got Mexico. Last year we had only 23, which is not a large number, pretty small, about 2% of those that we served. But we have seen a bit of a decrease since the new policies and the visa has been put in place for people coming from Mexico. Those are stories about Mexico and other stories from around the world. Some of them are pretty sad. Some of the immigration reforms being proposed right now may look good on paper, but the evidence in Australia that our current immigration minister seems to be following doesn't indicate that it is an improvement overall in immigrant attachment and success in the country.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. I see no further questions. Thank you for your presentation. Very interesting.
Thank you. And thank you to Councillor Pache for assisting us with the interfaith, and for all of you, Diane, the work that you've done over the years for us. Thank you.
Great. The proclamation comes up following the Mayor's report. Thank you. Now, the next delegation is Ms. Jennifer O'Rourke. Ms. O'Rourke. Now, as I pointed out earlier, it's 5 minutes on the Lindley Valley issue.
I think that, yes, I think we're mic'd. I'm going to speak to the motion to reconsider the February 27th council meeting motion about Lindley Valley West. And I can summarize it, but I think that you know the content of the motion, and I only have 5 minutes. But it's looking at the funding options to protect Lindley West, to get some legal expertise from Professor Deborah Curran, and to determine the landowner's perspective on the question. So today there's the motion to reconsider that decision to obtain information that could enable council to make more fully informed decisions about the future of Lindley Valley West. And it would be a shame if the intent of this motion was to limit council's opportunity to learn more about such an important issue. One would think that it is better to have as much information as possible when considering an issue that will involve a lot of money and affects the shape of the city of over 85,000 residents. So the following information that I'm going to present is directly relevant to the motion because funding opportunities are one factor that Council wanted to consider as part of the whole picture related to protecting Lindley Valley West. An outline of some of the funding options. Now, as you know, in the February 13th meeting, you asked us to, as a group, to look into the funding options for protecting Lindley Valley West. And I'd like to make this distinction clear, because it will come up later on, that we're talking about protecting Lindley Valley West. We're not saying specifically this must be acquisition, especially that it must be acquisition by the city. So we'll explain that later on. Now, the processing of identifying funding opportunities takes place in several layers, and the first layer is sort of 3 stages of information gathering, including reviewing the funder databases, studying funders' websites and documentation to get a shorter list of funders where the key elements seem to be a match in terms of goals, location, amount of funding available, and any specific requirements, such as the type of habitat to be protected. And the third piece of that is actually phoning the funders on the shorter list to confirm the funding information on their website is up to date, and to discuss in general terms Lindley West's eligibility for funding and any significant considerations. Now, the short version is that there are sound funding opportunities out there that match what Lindley Valley West could be. All the funders we contacted were helpful in providing more up-to-date and specific information than is available on websites, and they also helped identify specific considerations that affect Lindley West's eligibility for their funding. So as a result, we have a clearer idea of the factors that affect funding and the funding options available. I'd like to tell you some typical considerations for funding. First of all the funding and grant applications are competitive processes. They look for good evidence that the project will achieve, that their funding investment in the project will actually achieve the goals that the project says it will achieve. The evidence can include the indicators of community support and local government support, a range of funding sources, and a viable basis for partnership among the community, funders, and other stakeholders. For example, if one partner appears to be unreliable or indecisive, that could affect a funder's decision to support a project. Funding for habitat protection requires a long-term commitment to continue protection. And by long, we mean longer than the lifetimes of people here. For that reason, if a local government will hold title to land that is protected, funders require a very strong covenant that will ensure protection of the land in perpetuity, so it's not vulnerable to decisions by subsequent governments that threaten that protection. Many funders provide money to nonprofit organizations, I know that we've mentioned NALT, rather than directly to municipal governments, and sometimes conservancy organizations hold title to protected land. As well, partner organizations are expected to raise funds through donations from the local community. Funders often give priority to environmentally sensitive areas that are at immediate risk of damage or destruction. Unfortunately, there are a lot of areas. Is this 5 minutes?
It's 5 minutes, yeah, but if you could wind it up, please.
Would you like to know more about this?
Everyone gets 5 minutes on the same subject. That's only fair.
All right. I must say that my colleagues, I know their talks are only going to be about 2 minutes. I wonder if I could have a bit of their time.
No, I'm sorry. Just wind it up if you could, please. We have to be fair to everyone. And we started off by saying 5 minutes in advance. So
yes, I understand that, but this was,
Well, don't argue. Just go on with the wind it up now, because we're now 30 seconds into it. So I appreciate your cooperation.
Thank you.
Is that it? Okay, that's the wind-up. The next delegation is Ms. Joannis McRae. Ms. Joannis McRae, welcome. Up to 5 minutes again, please.
Thank you. Good evening, Mayor Rutan and councillors. My name is Joanne Jonas McRae, and I live at 5728 Malibu Terrace. I've lived in Nanaimo since 1996. I'm here to speak against the reconsideration of motion 18912, number 19 on the agenda. We have lived beside, picked blackberries, taken the kids on their bikes, explored and hiked in the Western Lindley Valley for the last almost 16 years, and have witnessed many changes over the years to West Lindley. Most of the changes have taken place in the last 6 or 7 years, with development encroaching upon the lands that once were wild. Although I wasn't involved in the movement to save the Eastern Lindley Valley, Cotta Lake and that area, I'm aware of some of the processes that had to occur before the area became parkland, and also the processes that occurred before other wild areas in Nanaimo, such as Neck Point Park, became parkland. We all know from past experience that protecting land is a fairly long process and requires a lot of commitment from many sectors of the community to see it through. The difference with the process of protecting West Lindley from East Lindley is that everything seems to be moving much more quickly, and we believe this is due to media attention, technology, and social networking. It is difficult to understand why Council would want to reconsider a motion that was voted on almost unanimously at the previous Council meeting. We as a group, Save Lindley Valley West, plan to continue our efforts to protect this important area. We would prefer to do this in partnership with the City, and we look for your continued support. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I see no questions. Thank you. The next delegation is Sally Ramsey. Ms. Ramsey? Welcome.
Good evening, Mayor Rutan and councillors. I was wondering, in connection with Jennifer O'Rourke's presentation, if it could be tabled for future consideration by you, because there's a lot of work put into it, a lot of information available in it.
Well, again, one of the problems is that if people felt that way, they could have given her 10 minutes. It's just that there's so many people speaking, such as yourself, on it, that if it's more than 4, it's limited to 5 minutes.
Okay.
I'm sorry.
I have a very short presentation.
Okay.
My name is Sally Ramsey. I live at 5775 Broadway Road, and I am obviously part of the campaign to protect Lindley Valley West. I believe that the whole of Lindley Valley is not just another piece of exploitable Nanaimo real estate, but a rare treasure within our city that we must protect for future generations and all the natural world that lives there. Since July of 2011, we have been in consultation with city staff, have met with and walked the valley and its ridges with several councillors, and made a number of presentations to council. Just yesterday, we had an interesting and informative walk with one of the landowners, ending up in a blizzard at one point. We have consulted with the Environmental Law Clinic at UVic, who are experts at finding options for the protection of environmentally sensitive areas. At present, as you have just heard with part of Jennifer's presentation, we are working quite diligently at finding support and funding agencies for the protection of these environmentally sensitive areas. And I'm here to to speak against the reconsideration of motion 18912, which is number 19 on the agenda. 2 weeks ago, to our surprise and delight, Councillor Bestwick, after voicing generous support for our campaign, brought forward this motion for staff to investigate and report on alternate funding mechanisms for the potential purchase of lands in Lindley Valley West, the ultimate protection. B, to approach property owners to inquire on properties for sale, and C, to schedule a session with Professor Deborah Curran of UVic's Environmental Law Clinic. The motion passed almost unanimously. This was a proper motion intended only to gather information that would help the municipality in its decision-making on this issue. And I just have a few questions, rhetorical questions to mull over. Why is there now a new motion to reconsider? And why stop the process now when all council members but one agreed on the motion 2 weeks ago? What has changed? And what other factors are at play here? We are asking no more of council as our elected representatives and city staff with their expertise in managing our business than to provide the framework for responsible environmental stewardship. And we'd like to work together in good faith. So thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Now, I might suggest if Ms. Blakeman and Mr. Reaper are willing, I wondered, would you object if we had the one late delegation that's been approved on the same subject? And so, with your indulgence, if we could just ask Mr. Blackhurst to come forward, and you also have 5 minutes, sir, if you'd like to speak on the matter. And that way, we'll keep the Lindley Valley a little continuity. And thank you for your cooperation. Welcome, sir.
Good evening. Norman Blatkhurst, 1200 Thunderbird Drive here in Nanaimo. Over the past several months, an interest group has stated that they would like to preserve Lindley Valley West as parkland. The area consists of approximately 300 acres, and Mount Benson Developments owns land use rights to approximately 180 acres in the area. 87 acres are zoned R10, and the remainder is zoned AR2 and currently in the urban reserve. Tonight, I will point to some aspects with respect to the vision of turning the area into parkland that haven't yet been part of the discussion. In terms of the need for more parkland in Nanaimo, Nanaimo currently already offers a wide array of parks to its residents. For example, Westwood Lake Park. It offers walking, running, fishing, swimming, hiking up Mount Benson and areas, mountain biking, and dog walking, with off-leash area in unspoiled natural setting with lots of wildlife habitat. Further, there are Bevan Park, Bowen Park, Morel Sanctuary, and numerous other parks tucked away in neighborhoods all over the city. What about Lindley Valley East, for example? Another spectacular walking, hiking destination and wildlife habitat. As for a legacy for future generations, our Stanley Park, I believe Newcastle Island to be exactly that. A legacy, not unlike Stanley Park. It's right downtown. Currently, this park, however, is quasi-inaccessible. I would like to propose council discussing the options of how to make this park more accessible to the public so that anyone can walk there rather than having to rely on a boat that runs on a limited schedule. Increased accessibility to this park would also make downtown more livable and serve as an attraction not only for us residents here, but also for visitors staying in our hotels and generally visiting the area. In terms of Nanaimo's economy and urban growth strategy, it is hard to ignore that Nanaimo is currently going through extensive growth in the commercial real estate sector. New projects are popping up everywhere. Where does this growth come from, and why do these developers choose Nanaimo to do business in? When business organizations review information before making decisions to invest, they look to all sorts of data: financial data, demographic statistics, and real estate market statistics. They also rely on regional and municipal documents to source where and how much growth is anticipated. The document I'm referring to specifically is the official community plan. The guiding principles of the OCP stipulate densification inside the urban areas, which Lindley Valley, or sections of it, are a part of. What document, if not the OCP, can the business community rely on when looking for clarity regarding long-term future plans of densification? Yet, there are further considerations to make. The section of the valley, which is set aside for development, contributes around $8 million in DCCs. And the perpetual tax base created estimates about $1.6 million annually. Labor-related wages involved in the building out this part of the area are estimated around $42 million. These wages only relate to the tradesperson who is involved in the construction of the improvements and don't take into consideration how many times this amount turns over in our community. The construction industry employs 5,000 people annually here in Nanaimo and accounts for $250 million in wages every year. One of the largest industries in Nanaimo, actually. The area will eventually house, that particular area will eventually house 2,000 to 3,000 residents, depending on density. And added to our community, and if missing from the economic mix, needs to be accounted for and needs also be part of the discussion that you have to partake in. In conclusion, there are indirect costs related to the issue far exceeding the cost of acquiring the lands. I encourage Council to take those aspects into consideration when moving further on this issue. However, real estate development in the present and in the future needs to occur with a respect for environmentally sensitive areas. There's no question about that. I believe this is possible under the current designated zoning code and in conjunction with provincial legislation for protecting wetlands. Mount Benson Developments has started a conversation with the leading individuals, the leaders of the Save the Lindley Valley West group, in addressing their concerns. We believe this needs to be an ongoing conversation, and one part of this conversation should involve the City of Nanaimo in clarifying what areas are actually retained as parkland via development of the area. A really good presentation and maybe a walk about the area with staff to show what areas are actually going to be identified as parkland. I believe by simply clarifying where these areas are would put some individuals at ease with the idea of developing some of the lands in the area. I thank you for listening.
You're right on the button of 5 minutes. Incredibly good timing. 5 minutes and 1 second, as close as you can get. I see no questions for you, sir. Thank you very much for the presentation. The next delegation is Ms. Blakeman and Mr. Reaper. Welcome, and thank you for indulging us with that last delegation.
Now it's on. Good evening, Mayor Rattan and council members. Thank you for hearing us this evening. So we're back before, I guess, the day is done on behalf of our many residents that we speak for. Andrea Blakeman and Lawrence Reaper, we live in the neighborhood. We're homeowners living in the single-family area, sub-area 1 of the Old City, approximately 365 homes. We are members of the Old City Neighborhood Association, and we're here representing the majority of those residents who are opposed to the zoning changes there. During the past 12 months, 2 surveys of the area have shown that 2/3 of the homeowners are desirous of returning to the zoning in place before bylaw 4500. We opposed these changes just before they were implemented. Specifically, we wanted to return to 600 square meters, minimum lot size, with no reduction to 450 square meters for alley access. Also, we requested a maximum height of 4.5 to 5.5 meters for accessory buildings and no duplexes on corner lots. We've compromised on the 600 square meters and are very pleased that the staff is recommending that both the removal of the lane access bonus and the lower height to the accessory buildings. Thank you. We also note that the prior presentation to the PNAC staff also recommended no duplexes on corner lots. PNAC actually endorsed this measure, but later amended it by just 2 members. Somehow, the endorsement was reversed as it applies to duplexes. We were actually present. It was very unclear how that happened. We still consider duplexes on corner lots of a 700 to 1,000 square meters really a wrong fit in this neighborhood. We've previously told you what a pleasant area this is to live in. We know our neighbors and we look out for each other. It represents the last single-family zoned part of the old city, and the heritage value is obvious. Some of the homes that could be potentially changed to a duplex on corner lots is the one in front of you here. Whoops. Excuse me.
This is the same picture taken at midnight. That was Councillor Beswick's line.
Sorry, I missed it. Techno idiot. Anyways, so what I wanted to just show you, these are some of the homes that will be up on the block potentially. Though the hedge is huge, I think half the city would like to own this house at some point in time. It's a beauty. Somebody here have it? This home on the corner of Elizabeth and Craig has an absolutely amazing view of the ocean, has an amazing view of the mountains. It's an extremely large lot. It potentially will go. This is a corner lot. This home inside and out is to its 100 and some years. The old bathtub is still there. It's a spectacular home. The reason we feel this is such a strong issue that we don't see that the density is needed in this area. The rest of the area outside of this R1 zone is already higher density. We'd also like to point out that since 2005, the addition of legal suites and accessory buildings, the single-family area has now the potential to double the population originally envisioned in the neighborhood plan. Since 1992, the Old City Neighborhood Concept Plan has identified land use strategy, density, and zoning which encompass the needs and desires of the neighborhood. In 1992, the OCP bylaw in 1987, number 3500, Schedule J of the Old City Neighborhood Concept Plan stated, quote, "This schedule is the Old City Neighborhood Concept Plan. The policies and land designations of this plan constitutes the official community plan policies and designations of the plan area. As a result, policies and designations of the Schedule J have priority over other policies in the OCP, which may conflict with the policies of this schedule." In 1999, the OCP bylaw 1996, number 6000, stated, quote, "The Old City Neighborhood Concept Plan 1992 is attached here to and made a part of this plan. The policies and land designations of the Old City Neighborhood Concept Plan constitutes the official community plan policies and designations of the Old City neighborhood area. The Old City Neighborhood Plan policies and designations take precedence over and replace other policies in the official community plan where they conflict." The OCP bylaw in 1987, 3500, was replaced by the 1996 number 6000 OCP bylaw, which in turn, after the Plan Nanaimo 10-year review, was replaced by the OCP 2008 6500, which I believe is current. We have been unable to find a more recent reference to the Old City Neighborhood Concept Plan policies and designations taking precedence over the OCP, and wonder if this situation still holds true. We would ask, if not, why not? Since clearly the originators of the plan had longevity in mind, and the plan obviously preceded the Plan Nanaimo. The city does not seem to have ever advised the neighborhood associations of a change to this plan. In 2010, at a meeting of the Nanaimo Neighborhood Network, city planning staff presented the highlights of the zoning bylaw, the new zoning bylaw. You might consider it significant in that, in answer to a question about how it would affect the Old City neighborhood, members were assured that the neighborhood plan would protect us. We felt reassured that the plan would indeed protect. Now we wonder if the staff member was correct in his assessment after all, and we should indeed have been excluded. Apart from the two recent non-withstanding clauses referring to a 7-plex and a 5-plex multiple residence rezoning in a 4-plex area in 2010 and 11 respectively, there's been no change in the wording of the Old City Neighborhood Concept Plan since its inception. That being said, it's clear that the Old City Neighborhood Concept Plan has been and continues to be a part of the OCP. We feel that allowing duplexes in the single-family area would be contrary to the neighborhood plan and consequently to the OCP. To quote selectively from the plan, in regards to the vision, residential development, established areas of single-family residential development are preserved. Under planning goals, quote, preservation of public view corridors, preservation of heritage character of the neighborhood, maintenance of the pedestrian orientation in terms of form, character, and scale of development, unquote. Under land use objectives and land designations, preserve architecturally historic and significant older homes, identify and maintain established areas of single-family housing. Under land use designations, the following land use designations meet these objectives. Subarea 1, single-family residential, permitted uses, single-family. Under point 5, maximum build-out density, sub-area 1, 362 parcels, all single-family dwellings. Total units, 364. Estimated population at 2.14 persons per household, or 774 in that small area. It's part of the map that you have for the evening. You will see that the single-family area, sub-area 1, is already at maximum build-out with a requisite population. Only 1 unit is permitted per lot per parcel. There's an obligation to preserve areas of single-family residences as well as architecturally and historically significant older homes. There are potentially 16 corner lots that could be developed. The past few that I've just shown you were some of those. They are in most cases, if not all, there are significant heritage homes relatively centered on the lots. Conversion might be a possibility. Unlikely, but destruction for a new duplex seems unthinkable, looking at some of these homes. For these reasons, we urge you to consider allowing duplexes in this area. Please approve our request and help preserve the unique part of the Old City for the future. The information about precedents of the OCP has only recently come to light, but was long discussed. For the record, we would actually like to, thank you, we would like to have an answer to the question, was there a change to the neighborhood plan that we were not aware of, and if so, when did it happen?
Okay, we have Councillor Patchy. Do you want to get a comment from staff first, or you want to go?
No, I can go now if you allow me. Thank you, Ms. Blakeman.
You're welcome.
I'm kind of glad to see you back here in the sense that we can hash this out one more time. But I also have to tell you that for you and Mr. Reaper to now come back and ask the question whether neighborhood plans supersede OCPs, that is something that I have known for a long, long time myself. And I've had a discussion with Mr. Reaper about that, and he claims not to have been aware of that. I've been aware of it for a long, long time. So that aspect to me comes a little late in the game.
Okay, I was not aware of that.
If I would still like to have staff's interpretation of that before I ask my follow-up, if I may.
Okay, who's going to go ahead?
Yes, Your Worship. Generally speaking, neighborhood plans have to be in compliance with the overall guidance of the OCP, which is the overarching document, and they become component parts of the overall OCP. So in terms of when we adopted the OCP, we didn't go through and revise each component part of the existing neighborhood plans. We adopted them as part of the OCP. That said, neighborhood plans are policy documents, not regulatory documents. So the zoning bylaw is a regulatory bylaw, whereas the neighborhood plans are policy bylaws. So they set out a concept, which is what the name of this is, and the general concept is still to recognize the single-family nature of the neighborhood. These other changes, like the change to add secondary suites, are things that have evolved over time as council has discussed and adopted new bylaws.
Thank you, Mr. Tucker.
Thank you. If I may have a follow-up then. You know, I was present at the PNAC meeting where this decision was made, and I concur with you that it was somewhat unorthodox. And I also remember asking you at that time that if we kept the height of accessory buildings between 4.5 and 5 meters, if we kept the lots, minimum lots, to 500, and if we did away with duplexes, those 16 spots that you have identified, then would you be satisfied?
Yes.
Would you still be satisfied if we tried this one more time?
With no duplexes?
Without going back years and years and have us thrown into doubt whether neighborhood plans supersede OCPs. And would you accept the explanation that Mr. Tucker gave you, which I think is reasonable?
I don't know that to be honest, I don't know that I understand the explanation. I don't know that I understand the difference between policy and
regulatory.
Yes.
Could you explain one more time?
In general terms, an OCP or a neighborhood plan sets a vision and a goal for an area, either citywide in the case of the OCP or in a specific neighborhood. It's an aspirational document. It's something we'd like to strive towards. In the case of a regulatory document, it sets out the rules and regulations, what permitted uses, what densities, what setbacks, and so on. So there's two different types of document, and the two documents, there are places in which there will be inconsistencies between the two. The zoning for the area in general is a single-family zoning, so the zoning generally complies with the neighborhood plan. But there are aspects of the zoning when you get down into the detail. For example, we allow secondary suites. If you take a literal meaning of the plan, you could say, well, we shouldn't have secondary suites within this neighborhood, but that's not council's direction. So just there are places of inconsistency.
I understand that. If I may
just one second.
Okay, go ahead.
Your Worship, another point to this is that the OCP would set the goals and objectives just like a neighborhood plan would for an area, and the zoning would fall into place either through a comprehensive zoning of the neighborhood or on a site-specific basis, depending on how council wants to proceed. But the zoning would take into account the site-specific issues that would help comply with the overall goals and objectives of the neighborhood plan. So there's two ways to achieve it, but definitely the OCP and neighborhood plans are a vision for the community. The zoning is what you can build on the property at the time. But that doesn't mean that there wouldn't be zoning that's single family and multifamily as projected for the nehborhood, and at some time in the future you would have a rezoning that would bring that into compliance.
Okay, final question, Your Worship, and that's to staff. 2 weeks ago I made a motion to exclude duplexes in the Old City neighborhood on the 16 spots that you mentioned, and it failed. Am I allowed a second chance, or is that off the table now?
Mr. Swaby, who's going to do it?
Your Worship, if the motion's been dealt with already, I think I would have to look at this and take a moment to have a peek, but it seems to me the procedure bylaw talks about not revisiting the same issue for 6 months.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. You're finished then, and I see no further questions. Oh, I do now. Councillor Kim.
You're not in favor of the duplexes?
Well, let me show you one of the issues. This is a duplex. This conservatively has 6 to 8 cars in front of it. It's single, they're small, they're dumpy. Well, you get the picture. Right around it are gorgeous homes. That beautiful old oak tree is across the street from this mess. This, until recently, was a fourplex.
Sorry, I was going to ask, if you went back to the duplex, can you give me an idea of the age of the one that, this one? You know? I mean, has it been there a long time? It looks like it's been there a long time.
Well, with very little care and upkeep, honestly, it's stucco, I don't know, maybe the 60s?
Yeah, something like that. 50s maybe, yeah.
I don't know.
Okay, thank you.
And this, until recently, was a fourplex, and again, is across the street from Heritage Homes. So I guess both the traffic, large lot sizes, corner lots, alleyways, I mean, if you look at the character and form of the entire neighborhood, this is what we potentially will look forward to as additional attributes of the neighborhood. I mean, I'm not here and speaking on behalf of, we're not here just on behalf of ourselves, we're here on behalf of the majority of 365 people.
Okay, Councillor Kipp, did you?
That was a no.
That was a no.
Thank you.
Sorry.
One to staff, Your Worship, want to follow?
Go ahead.
In the previous, the 96 OCP, and in the current one, the neighborhoods are building blocks of our OCPs. And when I quote from page 45 that they are supposed to form part of the neighborhood and the area plans provide more detailed policies which guide future land use and development among other matters for specific neighborhood area. That gives me the context, it's page 45, the last paragraph before the list of neighborhoods. That gives me the context that the neighborhood plans are actually overruling the OCP. So I view it differently from what staff had said, where the OCP is the overriding document, but I thought it was to be built on neighborhoods. And that's where I'm a little confused, where our neighborhood input sometimes is maybe overwhelmed by external resources with that. So is it, like we say we're supposed to be the building blocks to our neighborhood. That's not true in this OCP.
Mr. Tucker?
In terms of the neighborhood plans are an opportunity to refine the general policies within the OCP. So the OCP was developed over a 2-year period with consultation across the city, and now we're going through a series of neighborhood plans to develop more detailed policies in sub-areas of the city, and that we've recently seen with the South End Community Association and their plan, and the one for Newcastle and Brecon. So that was a case where we took general policies and broad brush policies of the OCP and refined them. So I would say, yes, we've used them. We've used the OCP as a building block as part of our neighborhood plans, and that it's so that the city, and there's equity across the city through the OCP, and the neighborhoods can also express how they want to develop in a more refined or detailed way with more detailed designations.
Okay, and so further to the question about when it was removed that the neighborhood plan was overwhelming, I guess it's another page out of the OCP, page 12, under the vision, which Imagine Nanaimo, and it says, the plan for the city of Nanaimo is not a significant departure from the vision, goal, and policy established with the adoption of Plan Nanaimo in 1996. Indeed, the vision remains the same. I could go on, but then how have these things been pulled out of it? Like the neighborhood strengths, the fact that this is a subservient document, the neighborhood document to the OCP. Because previously, they were always the key fundamental building blocks of our plan. I've studied the document.
To give an example of how general policy in the OCP has been refined, I would, for example, draw on the Newcastle plan, Newcastle and Brecon neighborhood plan, where a large portion of the Newcastle neighborhood had the single designation of corridor over it, which was one that was broad brush, and they, through their neighborhood planning process, refined that into sub-areas within the corridor, which included recognizing the heritage nature of Vancouver Avenue, for example, and the heritage homes along that stretch. So there is an opportunity to take the broad policy and then refine it more specifically to a neighborhood.
Colloquial. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you very much, Ms. Blicker, and I see no further questions.
Thank you.
Appreciate it. Okay, we're now moving into the mayor's report, and the Mayor's report for March 12. This week we launched the first of our community workshops in our campaign called Your Voice, Our Nanaimo. Your Voice, Our Nanaimo seeks community input to the corporate strategic planning process, which began last month. The goal of the strategic plan is to set a policy framework to link all of the existing city plans and to prioritize municipal investments over the next 3 to 5 years. We want to hear what residents think of our priorities what we think our priorities should be moving Nanaimo forward during Council's term and beyond. Tuesday, the first community workshop takes place at the Vancouver Island Conference Centre. On Wednesday, you're invited to the Moose Hall in South Nanaimo. Thursday, it's the Oliver Woods Community Centre in Nanaimo North End. All the meetings start at 7 p.m. You can attend any meeting you want or all the meetings. We're certainly hoping for excellent turnout because broad public participation will give City Council a better idea how to prioritize strategies in this plan. The best way to find out about other opportunities to participate in Your Voice, Our Nanaimo, over the coming weeks is to visit the city website and watch local news media for updates, and that's www.nanaimo.ca. And that is the Mayor's report. We move into proclamations now, and the proclamation that 2012, March 21, is the International Day for the Elimination of Racial Discrimination in the City of Nanaimo. And we're moving down into now item 11A.
Your Worship?
Sorry?
Your Worship, if
Yes.
I may. I have a conflict of interest on this issue, of pecuniary interest in this, so I'll be stepping out.
Okay.
I made a mistake the last time I stepped out on a conflict. I didn't declare why, so I'm declaring why on this.
Okay, thank you very much. Maybe the record show that Councillor Kipp has absented himself on the perceived conflict of interest. Community Safety and Development, DP 687, 371 Milton Street. Staff recommendation that Council issue development permit number DP 687 at 371 Milton Street with the following variances. 3-unit building, a required front yard variance of 3.9 meters or 12.8 feet, and a required side yard variance of 0.4 meters or 1.3 feet. The single unit building, a required rear yard variance of 5.4 meters or 17.71 feet, and a required side yard variance of 0.8 meters or 2.62 feet. Would somebody like to move?
Recommendation, Your Worship.
Moved and seconded. I see. Can't be any discussion. Councillor Kipp is still on here. He's gone. So all those in favor? Opposed? Motion carries. We'll move into DVP 188 at 5502. Whoop. Just for the benefit of Councillor Kipp, we're on DVP 188, 5502 Fernandez Place. Staff recommendation that Council direct staff to proceed with the required statutory notification for development variance permit number DVP 188 at 5502 Fernandez Place. Move it. Second. Move in second. No discussion. All those in favor? Opposed? Motion carries. Move into item C, liquor primary number LA74, permanent change to liquor primary license, the Queen's Hotel at 34 Victoria Crescent. Staff recommendation that Council recommend the Liquor Control and Licensing Branch, LCLB, approve the application to extend the Queen's Hotel opening hour of liquor service from 12 noon to 11:30 a.m. Monday through Sunday. Moved and second. No discussion. All those in favor? Opposed? Motion carries. Move into report of the public hearing held Thursday, March 1, 2012 for bylaws 4500.008, 4500.013, and 4500.012. Staff recommendation that Council receive the report and the minutes of the public hearing held that date. Moved, received, and seconded. No discussion. All those in favor? Opposed? Motion carries. Overleaf now, RA 275 at 560 3rd Street. Staff recommendation that Council 1 receive the report pertaining to zoning amendment bylaw 2012 number 4500.015, which is presented under the bylaw section of the agenda, and 2 direct staff to secure the following items should Council support the bylaw at third reading: A, registered covenant for student housing and 3rd Street re-profiling, and B, community contribution. Move recommendation?
Both recommendations, one of them.
1 and 2. Okay, it's been moved and seconded. Councillor Anderson.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Through you to staff, I just had a question in regards to the parking on this section, and it says, one second, let me just get to the page, that it's deficient in 21 parking spaces, and I was just wondering why it would be approved with the less amount of parking.
Mr. Tucker, it looks like you're on.
Yes, Your Worship. The shortfalls with regards to buildings A and B on the site of 21, in the second portion of the site, which is the townhouse, there's actually a surplus of 8 parking stalls, so it balances out at a shortfall of 13. In the area that has the shortfall, that area includes a building that is student housing, and the expectation is that student housing, there may be a lower level of car ownership for that group because of its proximity to VIU, and therefore staff are supporting the parking variance.
And a follow-up, if I may. Also, could you clarify for me where the park designation is on the application?
Yes, Derek, could you put up the site plan, please?
I know.
Out of the room.
I already know where it is.
Second slide. The image in front of council now shows the site plan for the proposed development. The subject property is the rectangle at the bottom of the page. The park dedication is the area along the Cat Stream, and that's not subject to tonight's application.
Thank you.
Okay, Councillor Johnstone.
Yes, Your Worship. I'm not sure whether staff can answer this question or not, but to the applicant, I know is in the room, but have there been discussions with the VIU housing people to know if there is a shortfall still with the Wakeside building that's going up of student housing, and who will monitor the use that it does remain student housing and set the rental rates?
In answer to the question, part 2 of the recommendation is that a registered covenant be secured in the form of a housing agreement that the building would be used for student housing. So there would be a housing agreement which allows the city to monitor that. In terms of the demand, I don't have recent information from VIU, but there was a substantial shortfall, students being housed in places like the Howard Johnson, for instance. So there's the expectation is that this will relieve some of the demand on student housing as this building of up to 50 units.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Tucker. Okay, going into, it's been moved and seconded now, so we'll call the question. All those in favor? Sorry. Oh, sorry, did you vote?
I was pressing the wrong button.
Sorry, I was looking. I didn't see anyone on the screen until now.
That's because I pressed the wrong button.
Councillor Bennett.
Well, I just want to remark that the earlier presentation that we had from the on the transportation plan talked about transportation systems and land use planning being really, they have to coincide and support one another. And I think this is one of those times when it does, in particular on the issue of the fewer parking spaces and relying more on bicycles. And I think those are the kinds of small but really important pieces when we're looking at trying to move people out of their cars, which we are, and we have this vision of 20 years later that there will be less emphasis on the car. So this is the beginning. So I was really actually happy to see fewer parking spaces and a little disappointed to see an excess of parking spaces on the other side. I would have liked to have seen that philosophy carry through and have councils kind of grapple with the question of at some point saying to development, no, we want you to partner with us on this effort to get people out of their cars, and we don't want to accommodate cars so much. So I was quite happy to see the coinciding of those two principles.
Yeah, good point. They could always fall back on electric scooters, too. I mean, those are always options that people have. Councillor Patchy.
Thank you, Worship. I'm glad for the second chance since I didn't push my button either. The housing covenant to staff, if I may, does that say anything about whether the condo units are going to be condo units or are they going to be rental units?
The housing agreement would apply to the student housing portion of the development only.
Then, okay, that answers that. For clarification's sake, to those who have access to the staff report, could you explain the difference in community contribution, how we came to an amount of 123,000 and 100,000 was being offered? Please.
Community contribution, first off, I have to begin by saying that it's a voluntary contribution made by the developer to recognize the increase in value through the rezoning process if successful. The rule of thumb that we use in the department when negotiating community contributions are to base it on the number of units that are going to be developed on the site and the square footage of the commercial space. So this is a combination of the number of units that are going to be appearing on the site, plus the floor area of approximately 10,000 square feet of commercial space. For the student housing, because they're very tiny units, we count the student housing as for every 3 units of student housing, we count that as 1 dwelling unit, because it roughly equates in terms of the size, but we do give a discount, if you will, for those. So it's a combination of, and it's a rule of thumb. It's not a hard and fast. It's what we negotiate with the development community, and it's to recognize that increase in value through a rezoning process.
Okay, and a follow-up, if I may. I know there has been conversation about a contribution to the Fairway School by the developer. That comes at subdivision time?
That offer that was made by the developer pertains to, Derek, sorry to bother you again, but if you could put up the first slide this time. You'll see to the north of the shaded area, there's another lot to the north, and that offer of that contribution was related to subdivision of that lot to the north, which isn't the subject of this rezoning. It's a separate matter.
But that is still something that could be changed or withdrawn or whatever?
The offer's been made by the developer and has been, I gather, that's been also communicated to a number of members of council. So,
thank you.
Okay, Councillor McKay.
Yes, Your Worship. I just noted that one of the developers' representatives is in the audience tonight. If there's any questions that we wanted to put forward to them that staff may not be able to answer, I'm sure he'd be happy to help us with that.
Okay. Well, I see no further questions at this point. I did pause just in case, so that. So on the motion, it's been moved and seconded. All those in favor? Opposed? Motion carries. We're moving to RA 287, 4830 Vista View Crescent. Staff recommendation that council receive the report pertaining to zoning amendment bylaw 2012, number 4500.016, which is presented under the bylaw section of the agenda. Move second and second. I see no discussion. All those in favor? Opposed? Motion carries. Moving into the proposed Old City neighborhood R1B subzone. Staff recommendation that council receive the report pertaining to zoning amendment bylaw 2012 number 4500.014, which is presented under the bylaw section of the agenda.
Your Worship?
Yes.
On a procedural matter, Councillor Paggi asked earlier on if it was appropriate to reconsider his motion from February 13th, and that was related to excluding duplexes on corner lots. that motion was defeated on a 4-4 tie with one council member absent. Having done just a little bit of research, there's one avenue for reconsideration, and that is the mayor's ability to reconsider under Section 131 of the Charter. And so that's the only available method to reconsider that motion, Your Worship.
And that statutory period is up to 30 days?
That's correct, and we're at 28 days today.
28 days today.
Yes.
Okay. Thank you very much. Councillor Bestwick, you're on now.
Thank you, Your Worship. Just a question to Mr. Holmes then. Is that opportunity for reconsideration available to the mayor this evening?
It is available to the mayor, yes.
Thank you.
Oh, 2 went off. Is there? Okay.
No pressure.
No pressure, and I have 28 days to make the final decision, do I?
No, 2 days.
Oh, 2 days, did you say?
Your Worship, the Charter allows 30 days, and it has been 28 days since that.
Oh, I'm sorry, I misunderstood you.
Yes. Yeah, so there's
the next leap year in February.
2 days from now, where will I be? Oh, Councillor Kipp. Well, listen, I'm quite prepared to. You had a valid reason for wanting to revisit this again?
Yes, I believe I do. In that, first of all, the procedure at the PNAC level was unorthodox, for lack of a better word. I believe that in spite of the explanations, a good explanation that was given by Mr. Tucker with regards to neighborhood plans and OCPs and the connection between the two and what might supersede and what might not, I really believe that if we should be able to pass a motion that will take duplexes on those 16 spots out of the equation, that we have done our duty to the Old City neighborhood, and I would be hoping that you would consider that.
Well, for my part, I might just add that I am very pleased with what has happened in the Old City Quarter. There's been a lot of work done. The homes are homes that everyone can be proud of. A lot of work's gone into it. So I do want to respect the presentations that were made tonight and the views that were expressed. And so I am going to recall it. And the actual technical phrase, Mr. Holmes, is I simply
Your Worship,
just initiate it.
I think, Your Worship, you could call a reconsideration on motion 15512 from February 13th, and Council would first vote on the. You could bring it back for reconsideration. It would be voted to reconsider, and if that motion passed, you would revote the motion.
Okay. So I will do that and recall the motion. Moved and seconded. I can move that to myself as a recall, and it's been seconded by Councillor Johnstone.
Yep.
So on the motion to, Councillor Anderson, you go ahead.
Can you just recall the motion so I know what the particular motion said?
It was
the motion. It was moved and seconded that motion be amended to exclude duplexes on corner lots as recommended by NOCA and PNAC. The motion was defeated. Opposed, Mayor Rattan, Councillors Anderson, Greaves, and Kipp.
Thank you.
Okay. Councillor Bestwick.
Thank you, Worship. On a reconsideration such as this, is it 50% plus one, or is that just 50 plus one? Majority. It's just simple majority. Thanks.
Okay, so the motion is to recall and reconsider. I'm sorry.
Yeah. So have you voted on the? I don't think you voted on the reconsideration yet.
Okay.
So that's
so it's up for now, and now we're going to.
So you can vote.
Yes. Okay.
So you can vote in favor of reconsideration or against reconsideration.
Yep, to reconsider. Okay.
If that passes.
Yeah.
If that passes, then the motion is on the floor for discussion.
Okay. So all those in favor? Opposed? We have, so we have 1, 2, 4. So it's actually 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So we have Councillor Brennan opposed. Councillor, it passes. Councillor.
The motion is now on the floor for reconsideration for discussion.
Okay. Councillor Greaves, Councillor Anderson, and Councillor McKay opposed. Balance Council in favor. Motion passes. So the motion is now up for reconsideration, for a vote again, and
I will make the motion of the original motion, Your Worship, that was...
One more time, okay. And Councillor Kipp, are you speaking on this one? Yes. Before you do, let's go, and you seconded, did you? Moved and seconded? Councillor Kipp.
Yes, Your Worship. I'm somewhat perplexed, but I think I'm going to change my vote on this one because of the neighborhood and the concern in the neighborhood. One of my concerns by just a single-family residential neighborhood, I'll go to the monoculture in the north end. When you get to single-family residential and it stretches for miles, it becomes very monoculture. One of the things I like about the mix of housing in areas is that people can afford different types of housing in the neighborhood. Despite the fact that one of the duplexes was ugly, in your own mind, it still is a form of housing. It still is a form that someone can afford to live in that area. And if it's such a nice area, it would ultimately give someone the opportunity maybe to move into a nicer area of town. But that fact said, I've always supported the neighborhoods and the concept of neighborhoods and how they work. So for this one, I'll change my mind because we can always change it again.
I think. Okay, on the motion, and then this motion...
To exclude the duplexes.
Yeah, I just want to make sure that that's what we have there too.
Yeah.
Okay. Sorry.
Yeah.
Go ahead, Councillor Brennan.
I want to ask staff about this authority under the charter, I guess, for what's it called, intensive, where we can set up zones where we get to deal with the character and structure of the homes, right?
Mr. Tucker, you're on.
It's called these intensive neighborhoods or something.
It's under the authority in the Local Government Act that governs establishing development permit areas. And the language in the Local Government Act is to establish development permit areas for intensive residential development. So what that was created for was to allow guidelines, development permit guidelines, so about the form and character of buildings in infill settings. So what we have committed to with NOCA is to begin a dialogue about developing a set of guidelines for intensive residential development, but it is to address the form and character in these infill small lot settings, and that's why the language is intensive residential.
Would that capture duplexes?
Yes, it would.
All right. So the concerns that have been expressed tonight about the type of housing perhaps not meeting a standard that some neighborhoods might want to set, that could be addressed through this process?
What we would do is we would work with the neighborhood to develop standards for the infill development and then bring that forward to council consideration, and it would become a development permit area over this same area that is going to be R1B. And we would be talking about small lot, single family duplex, coach houses, laneway houses, that sort of thing. So it would cover that whole range of housing types.
So a duplex that was proposed would have to fit those guidelines?
Once they were in place,
Once
yes.
they were in place, yes. So the likelihood of finding the kinds of housing that appeared to be offensive would be lessened under that.
That would be the hope, but I think the concern that's been expressed by NOCA is that those aren't in place today, and therefore there could be redevelopment, and therefore we could end up with an unattractive duplex development.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, for my part, I'm really uncomfortable about changing positions on these things, but the character and form of the Old City Quarter is very important to me, and I think there's, as I mentioned earlier, a huge amount of restoration on a lot of the homes have been done there, and I think the input from the delegations was important for me, and so I will support. So, that said, no further questions. All those in favor?
The motion ran out of page, so I know what the heck I'm doing.
Who's going to read it?
that the motion be amended to exclude duplexes on corner lots as recommended by NOCA and PNAC. So, and the effect, Your Worship, was that perhaps Mr. Tucker could speak on the effect of that motion if this passes.
Mr. Tucker, go ahead.
If this motion to put a restriction on duplexes within the R1B area, we would take that item off the agenda when it comes up for first and second reading this evening. We would rewrite the bylaw to put that prohibition in, and then we would bring the bylaw back at the next meeting with that addition to the bylaw. So we would need to amend the bylaw to put that language in so that it's correct for first and second reading.
And Your Worship, through Mr. Tucker, that would miss one public hearing then, is that correct?
Yes, we would be bringing it back on the 26th of March for first and second reading, so there wouldn't be adequate notification period for the April 5th public hearing, so we'd be into May for the public hearing on that item.
Okay, everyone comfortable with that? No further questions? Question on the motion, all those in favor? Opposed? We have Councillor Anderson, Councillor Greaves, and Councillor Brennan opposed. Balance of council in favor. The motion passes. We'll move on to property maintenance bylaw. Property maintenance bylaw number 1990, number 3704. It's requested that council hear anyone wishing to speak with respect to property maintenance at the properties listed below. Staff recommendation of council pursuant to property maintenance bylaw 1990, number 3704, direct the owners of the following properties to remove the material as listed below from the premises within 14 days, or the work will be done by the city or its agents at the owner's cost. The first one is 45 Halliburton Street, discarded wood, fencing, building materials, garbage, and miscellaneous debris. Is there anyone in attendance that would like to speak to matters related to 45 Halliburton Street? The next, number 2 has been pulled, and number 3 is 834 Jordan Avenue, 2 derelict Chev Cavaliers, a derelict Ford pickup truck, and a derelict utility trailer. Is there anyone in attendance who would like to speak to matters related to 834 Jordan Avenue? Seeing none, if somebody would like to move this recommendation, moved and seconded. No discussion. All those in favor? Opposed? Motion carries. Moving into item I has been pulled. J is unresolved building deficiencies. Notice on title, section 5-7 at 156 Calder Road. It's requested that council hear anyone wishing to speak with respect to unresolved building deficiencies at 156 Calder Road. Staff recommendation of council by resolution instruct the manager of legislative services to file a bylaw contravention notice respecting the property at 156 Calder Road, incomplete building permit, finished basement at the land title and survey authority of British Columbia under section 5-7 of the community charter. Is there anyone in attendance who would like to speak to matters related to 156 Calder Road? Seeing none, if someone would like to make that motion, please. So moved. Second. All those in favor? Opposed? Motion carries. Move into information items, if someone would like to move them. Moved and seconded. Discussion, any discussion on the report on what's building in my neighborhood? It is a good idea, excellent. But no questions on that, so we'll move along. Mr. Knight did a great job on that. Reconsideration of bylaws to be moved by Councillor Kipp.
Thank you. So, the zoning amendment bylaw 2012 number 4500.008, that is RA 282, to rezone 1350 Fielding Road from rural resource AR1 to single dwelling residential R1 in order to allow a single family subdivision past third reading.
Is there a seconder? Seconded. No discussion. All those in favor? Opposed? Motion carries.
That zoning amendment bylaw 2012 number 4500.012 to reinstate zoning regulations omitted in error when bylaw 4000 was replaced with bylaw 4500 to provide further clarification to existing regulations or definitions and to correct minor typographical errors past third reading.
Moved and seconded. No discussion. All those in favor? Opposed? Motion carries.
That zoning amendment bylaw 2012 number 4500.013 RA 286 to rezone 2046 Boxwood Road from high-tech industrial I3 to light industrial I2 in order to permit the use of food and beverage processing. Pass third reading.
Second. Moved and seconded. All those in favor? Opposed? Motion carries.
Oh, yeah. The financial plan bylaw 2012 number 7144 to confirm and adopt the financial plan be adopted.
Moved and seconded. No discussion. All those in favor? Opposed? Motion carries. Oh, you opposed? Sorry. Councillor Bestwick is opposed and Councillor Kipps opposed. Balance of council in favor. The motion passes. And introduction of development bylaws.
This one, Your Worship.
Yes.
Is this
just for clarification?
That's correct. This is one that we'll revise and bring back for
revision.
Yes.
Thank you.
Both 1 and 2.
A1 and 2 are sent back for revision. Okay. 15B. That zoning amendment bylaw 2012 number 4500.015 RA 275 to rezone 563rd Street from single dwelling residential R1 to mixed use corridor COR2 and single dwelling residential small lot R2 to allow subdivision of the land and development of mixed use and multifamily buildings as well as single family small lots passed first reading.
Second motion.
Did you second? Oh, no, you did, sorry. I see no discussion. All those in favor? Motion carries.
The zoning amendment bylaw 2012 number 4500.015 passed second reading.
Seconded. No questions. All those in favor? Opposed?
Number C, that zoning amendment bylaw 2012 number 4500.016 RA 275 to rezone 4830 Vista View Crescent from townhouse residential R6 to single dwelling residential R1 to allow subdivision lot into 10 single family residential lots. Pass first reading.
Moved and seconded. All those in favor? Opposed? Motion carries.
That zoning amendment bylaw 2012 number 4500.016 pass second reading.
Second. All those in favor? Opposed? Motion carries. Thank you, Councillor Kipp. Moving into council appointments. Oh, man. I forgot how many there were. Read them all. That's the point. We've got, I guess, a benefit for people at home that don't have the list in front of them. We may have to. The council appointments, A, community at large appointments to advisory bodies, commissions, and boards. Recommendation of council ratify the following appointments to various council advisory bodies, commissions, and boards for a three-year term ending March 31, 2015. Well, I was going to read them out. I just think for the benefit of them, and I will apologize in advance for stumbling over any pronunciation. Advisory Committee on the Environmental Sustainability, no particular order, Suzanne Andre, Sherry DeBoer, Ann Kerr, and Edward or Ted Perry. Design Advisory Panel, Bob Bollinger, Kevin Castrol, Will Melville, and Nathan Middleton. Grants Advisory Committee, William Anderson and France Tellier. Social Planning Advisory Committee, Velda or Val Alcock Carter, Suzanne Andre, Terry Flower, Elizabeth Forrester, Zenny Martman, Linda McCandless, Ralph Meyerhoff, John Neville, and Angelica Velchar. Transportation Advisory Committee, David Gray, David Murchie, Michelle Patterson, and Jim Routledge. Nanaimo Athletic Commission, Bruce Avis, Ed Garner, and Brent Munier. Nanaimo Community Heritage Commission, Mercedes Baudouin, Lob, William Gard, John Hoffman, Charlene Riches, Lloyd Sherry, and Jill Stannard. And Parks, Recreation, and Culture Commission, Karen Alden, Linda Avis, Mercedes Baudouin Lob, Donald Rinwald, and Ian Thorpe. Board of Variance, Janet Cowling, Alan Dick, and Mark Dobbs. Appointment of the city representative of the Nanaimo Airport Commission. Recommendation that council direct staff to advise the Nanaimo Harbour Commission. I'm sorry, say again, the Nanaimo Airport Commission.
Perhaps council should vote on that first batch first.
First batch, okay.
Yeah.
So the motion on the first one, moved and seconded for all the ones up to including the Board of Variance. All those in favor? Opposed? Motion carries. Now we'll move into B, the appointment of city representative to the Nanaimo Airport Commission. Recommendation that council direct staff to advise the Nanaimo Airport Commission. The council has selected Gordon Hayes as the City of Nanaimo nominee to serve on the Nanaimo Airport Commission for a 3-year term ending on the date of the Airport Commission annual general meeting to be held in April 2015. And so if someone would like to move that and move and seconded? Moved or second, whichever one you have. All those in favor? Opposed? Motion carries. Appointment of the city representative of the Nanaimo Airport, I'm sorry, say again, the Nanaimo Port Authority Board. Recommendation that council ratify the appointment of Mervyn Unger to serve as the city of Nanaimo representative on the Nanaimo Port Authority Board for the term 2012 July 01 to 2015 July 30th. Moved. Seconded. All those in favor? Opposed? Motion carries. Great acoustics here. Now we're going to move into the final one, I think, is the appointment of the city representative for the DNBIA, the Downtown Nanaimo Business Association Board. Recommendation that council ratify the appointment of John Cooper and Kerry Lowe to serve as the City of Nanaimo representatives on the Downtown Nanaimo Business Improvement Area, DNBIA. Moved and seconded. All those in favor? Opposed? Motion carries. Other business. We'll move into 19A now. Councillor McKay to request reconsideration of motion 18912 as per section 33 of the Council Procedure Bylaw 2007 number 7060. Councillor McKay.
Thank you, Your Worship. It was moved and seconded that council refer information only item 12A, acquisition of Lindley Valley West, to staff for a report on alternative funding mechanisms for the potential purchase of Lindley Valley West, and direct staff to approach the property owners to inquire if the properties are for sale and to schedule a session for council with Professor Deborah Curran of the Faculty of Law at the University of Victoria. Respectfully request to put the motion forward that we reconsider the original motion.
Okay, is there a seconder? Moved and seconded. Any further discussion on those? The motion to refer, Councillor Patchy.
Thank you, Worship. I'll be speaking against this motion. I have looked at this from the very beginning when Councillor Bestwick made his motion, and I was able to attend my friendly amendment to hear Professor Curran of UVic. I have looked at this as an opportunity that I think we all owe ourselves to take advantage of in order to be enlightened and in order to have everything that we possibly can have to eventually make a decision. Now, I want you to know that 3 or 4 days ago, I, like most of you, had a very pleasant meeting with Mr. Bladgersti of Mount Benson Development, and he has very valid concerns. There's absolutely no doubt that there are property rights that we have to be very careful with. That said, I think that we have come to a point where there are two opposite forces that are coming together. There is Mr. Bladgersti and his very valid argument, and there is the argument of the Save Lindley West people, which to my mind, and certainly still at this point, is a very valid argument as well. I like Lindley Valley. I like all of it, and I think the least that we can do as an elected body is to get all the information, and I mean all the information, that we have to have in order to eventually make what obviously is going to be a very difficult decision. That said, I've been made aware of some reaction from various and sundry people. I think that was a well, not just the one, but more than one, were more a knee-jerk kind of reaction than anything else. And so I would tell people that it behooves this council to get all the information. And that said, Your Worship, I hope that this gets defeated, because it is really important that we search every angle possible. Thank you.
Councillor McKay.
Thank you, Your Worship. I apologize for not being on top of the procedures. I would have expected that once the motion was seconded, that I would have spoken first. I just want to say that since the original motion, I've had many consultations with members of the public, and new information has come to light that would prevent me from now supporting this motion. Thank you.
I think everyone can keep in their same seats, so nobody has to move at that sound. It's actually, I believe Councillor Anderson, were you backing up on that one, or what was that? Okay, the Councillor Kipp.
Thank you, Your Worship. For me, I mean, I understand the fact that the concern in the community for development rights and the concern, I've also know I've fought for like 20 years for Lindley Valley to keep it as a natural, just an asset to the community. And I think when people talk about the new OCP and its development rights, well, the development rights for this property literally changed within that. It used to be in a contained urban area that no one was to touch, and it got moved into an open area that is open for development because we're going to protect everything outside of our border. But I do believe we have to research all of the avenues. The only one I'm disappointed with, and I think it relates to Professor Curran, where they talked about sort of downzoning the property for our benefit. I totally don't support that. I never did, never will. Bit disappointed with some of the language that was written in letters to us, or some of the comments to us. Very disappointed, actually, especially on short notice and what I believe would be a bit of misinformation. So I can't support redoing this. I believe we need to continue, as Councillor Paget said, to look at methods to look for protection. At least we might learn from this piece of property to help us on other pieces of property or in other jurisdictions if we have. So to get as much information on how that system works, because I believe some of us at the table are confused of how that works with the acquisition of land or what alternatives are. So I believe we're researching, and I believe it's due diligence on our part. And so I can't support the motion to remove this. So I'm not voting in favor of taking this motion away, and I want the motion clear so when we vote, I know which direction we're going. Thank you.
Okay, for my part, I will be supporting the motion, and for a couple of reasons. Number one, the cost of it is I think it's a lovely piece of land. There's no dispute there, but the cost is into the millions and millions and millions of dollars. And on one, we keep finding people saying, cut the budget, reduce our taxes, do all these good things, and you can't suck and blow at the same time. I think the issue we're facing here is that we either spend millions and millions and millions of dollars, and if that doesn't have a huge impact on the budget, I don't know what will. And also, I think it's important to remind everyone that the OCP clearly identified the Lindley Valley for development, and that's a part of our OCP, which is the official community plan. It's a great piece of land, and if money was no object, I would have a different feeling, but I'm just not able to support spending millions of dollars, no matter how good the property is at this time. Councillor Johnston.
Thank you, Your Worship. I'm feeling a bit of a hypocrite tonight because I've campaigned for two terms now on the preservation of green space and trails in our city. And as a commissioner on Parks, Recreation, Culture, I still very much are, that is my mandate, is to preserve and green space for future generations. However, this plan has not been, Lindley Valley has not been part of the Parks Plan, and it has not been budgeted for. I'm gratified that the Friends of Lindley Valley are meeting with the developer and looking at preservation of the sensitive areas, developing of trails, and I'm absolutely certain that between the Parks, Recreation and Culture and the developer, who seems very sincere in developing this land properly for everybody to enjoy, I'm hoping that we can move forward on this and work together to maintain space for all of us to enjoy in the future, Your Worship. And for that reason, I'm going to be supporting the motion tonight. I cannot continue giving the people from Lindley Valley false hope in that we are going to come up with $8, $10, $11, $12 million, whatever it is, at the taxpayers' expense of 8% or more per tax, tax increase in the future years. So, having said that, Your Worship, I am not going to be supporting. I will be supporting it.
You are going to? Okay. Councillor Beswick.
Thank you, Your Worship. Just personally, as a former hockey coach, I'd like to thank you for taking me into my comfort zone. That'd be a dressing room to make the comments you made. Thank you. Well, Your Worship, as you are well aware, over the recent months and probably years on council, I've expressed on more than one occasion my disdain for process, procedure, and we've had many debates on that very topic, regardless of what the item was that we were dealing with. So speaking to the motion that I put on the table, although I may not feel differently about the topic, I do believe that the process in which we arrived at the vote was perhaps hastily prepared and presented in its context. And while my views on this particular motion may or may not have changed since February 27th, I do believe that the process is something that should have been undertaken in a different manner than it was. I know that there's been conversation about downzoning as something that would be intentful and potentially at the peril of the owners of the properties, and hence our opportunities to take advantage of such, which clearly wasn't the intent of the motion. So on that basis, Your Worship, and I don't think that if this motion is successful, that it precludes us from having these same discussions and these same investigations take place in the proper place for them to take place. And therefore, Your Worship, I will be supporting this motion.
Okay, Councillor Greaves.
Thank you, Your Worship. It's nice to see the other councillors finally coming to their senses. Just joking. I'll support the motion to reconsider. It's an urban reserve. There's no funding available. It's not a priority, and we shouldn't downsize it. That's morally wrong to purchase it. Who doesn't like that property? But it's not in the works. It's not a priority, and it's unfortunate. It's unfortunate we can't buy all this stuff, but we can't.
Yeah.
So
that's the issue. Okay, now before we hear from Councillor Kipp again, is there anyone who hasn't spoken on this subject that would like to first? Seeing none, Councillor Kipp. Oh, sorry, did you?
I'm waiting to hear what he has to say.
Oh, okay, fine.
Your Worship, all I'm saying is I hear the words false hope and polarized view. Just by bringing this motion forward and coming it, we've actually got the groups sitting and talking together. Mr. Blattgurst has gone and met with the people. They've walked through. I believe this process is actually, versus false hope, it's created some collaboration. And I think sometimes by doing something dynamic, we get people involved. And people hear different things. I do agree with some of my peers that this thing was put across poorly. We were rushing. People looked us in the eye, and we have to sometimes to sit and think. But I think this has been a pretty good collaborative process. I think that it drove that by making this like we're going after it. I truly disapprove the fact that we ever said we would take it away from someone. I mean, that falsehood probably started this. People were really afraid. So I guess I still support the motion on just finding out the information. I mean, for me, it's more about information and what we could do for property.
I see no other questions at this time. That no bells ringing, so I guess that means it's time to vote here. So that on the reconsideration motion, all those in favor? Opposed? We have Councillor Pachi, Councillor Kipp opposed, balance of councillor in favor. The motion passes. Reconsideration.
We have to redo the motion now.
Your Worship, that's correct. The motion is now that
it's now live again for that.
So now that motion 18912 is on the table for deliberation and voting.
Okay. So do we want to read? Is everyone familiar with the motion?
Yes.
It's before you there. So that we don't need to have a mover or a seconder because it's been recalled. And as such, we're ready to go right into the vote. Councillor Brennan?
Yeah, I'm actually speaking now to the motion itself rather than whether we reconsider.
That's correct.
I agree with Councillor Beswick that this was probably inappropriately discussed in open. So I'm not going to say anything more than that because I do not believe that this is something that should be discussed in open. So I will vote against this.
Okay. I see no other questions. Okay, Councillor Anderson.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and I'm going to agree with Councillor Brennan on that the procedure which we took with this motion was not correct, and we hastily moved forward with it, so that's all I will say in that. Let's vote on this.
Councillor Kipp.
That's an interesting one on that one. We want to be open and transparent, but yet we've got to talk about certain things in camera. I think we erred on the side of trying to be open and transparent on this one, and we probably did make a mistake, but like I say, I'm glad it's in public.
Councillor Brennan, you going to go?
Yeah. When you're dealing with land acquisition and you're dealing with money and you're dealing with people's futures, you really need to err on the side of caution.
Agreed. Okay, that looks like the motion now back on the floor is the one that we have before us, and so we'll call a question on those ones. All those in favor? Sorry?
Favor of the motion.
The motion is that
we pursue this information. I don't think you're in favor.
Oh, yeah, no, okay, that's sorry. That. So, Mr. Holmes, do you want to have a go?
Your Worship, the motion that's on the floor is...
we don't want to go back to revisit?
Is to have staff to do a report on alternative funding mechanisms, et cetera, et cetera. So that's the motion that's on the floor. So motion...
To go back to the staff for further work on it. Then.
Correct. So
if we want to... Okay.
So those in favor of that...
Those in favor of having it go back to staff for further work on it. All those in favor? Councillor Pachi, Councillor Kipp. Opposed? Councillor Brennan, Councillor Greaves. We have Mayor Tan, Councillor Anderson. Thank you, Councillor Johnson, Councillor McKay. It fails on that. So now we're going into delegations pertaining to items not on the agenda, up to 10 minutes, and the delegation is Mr. Douglas McBride. Mr. McBride, you have up to 10 minutes, sir.
My name is Douglas McBride. I live at 185 Garner Crescent. If I could just reference the history of attending before council on this topic of the bank below Garner Crescent. I was here several times, and about 2.5 years ago I expressed the fear that I might become addicted to attending council, and your worship said that was council's worst fear. So I'm bank today. I brought my graphic from last time just to show you what we're talking about. Down at Wakasai at the top of the hill, Bowen Road, Wakasai at the top of the hill. There basically isn't a bank. It's just basically a bit of a slope down. When you then come up to the far end of Garner Crescent, it's directly above Buttertubs, and there's a very significant bank. Of course, this depicts the closer you go to Buttertubs, the bigger the bank, and down to Rikasaya, there isn't one. Now, council at the time, we came asking for some variations on the development below, and we asked that the height of the houses be limited to the standard bylaw of 27 feet rather than the proposed 42.5 feet. And council agreed with that and deleted from the development, the proposed development, lots 18 to 21. And we were appreciative of that. The second thing we asked for is that we protect the bank, the full length of it. The developer over the preceding 10 years had made many representations that he wanted to protect the bank. So I now bring you to the photographs that I've brought. The first one is a picture. I think those were distributed to you earlier. The first one shows the bank a little to the west of the lot in question that's been stripped. You can see at the bottom of the photograph the curb and sidewalk on the road that runs below the bank, and you can see some of the houses up on the top of the bank. The lot in question is not this high, and I'll come to that in a minute. The bank further west is higher than what's depicted here, but you can see from this photograph that it is a significant bank. The second photograph is one that we took at the back of my property, which is one lot over from the lot in question. What we did here was we put two 10-foot 2x4s onto the property. You'll see that there's a level on the horizontal one, and that basically is at the top of the bank. We then put the second 2x4 paralleling the drop-off, and you can see that there's a drop-off or angle. That's the beginning of the bank that's just over from the lot in question. As I say, if you go down to Wakasaya, it's not this steep. If you go out to Buttertubs, it's steeper. The developer and the city have prepared topographical maps that show these little lines on the lots, and I guess some people can read those, but for those of us that actually walk at the top of the bank, it's a lot steeper than those little lines show us. If you strip the trees and growth off the bank, you will fall down the bank. You could put a rope on it and could, of course, walk down holding onto the rope. But it's a steep bank for most of the bank. The third photograph then shows what happened to the lot about a week ago, and an excavator went on it and stripped the bank basically within 10 feet of the lot line at the top. I got to be fully honest here, is that of all the lots that butt on Garner Crescent, this one is probably the lot that could be least offended, in the sense that it didn't have any significant trees on it. You'll see in the top two corners there's little wee, probably holly trees that were left by the excavator. Substantially it was brambles, and it got stripped. Now, our main concern here is that all the way along, the bank was going to be basically protected with the houses going in. Now, often in these cases, there's funnies involved involved, and one of them was when I first attended at the city, bringing the clearing of the lot to the attention of the city. I was told that there was only one comment on the file on the computer, and it was read out to me. It was, what's that covenant running through the middle of our house? And of course, you can walk down on the lot, and the stakes of the covenant restricting the clearing of the bank are within 5 and 10 feet of this hole that's being dug. So I guess we're just expressing a real frustration that this has happened. Limited remediation would be necessary to deal with this particular part of the bank. But we're just so concerned that this not be repeated on all of the other lots that abut the bank. It doesn't make sense. And so we're asking that basically you support us in an effort to get the remediation done, which I have to say I think would be limited on this lot. But for goodness sakes, let's not put an excavator onto the bank as it gets progressively steeper. It just doesn't make sense. And I don't think it makes sense for the developer either.
Mr. McBride, can I just ask you a quick question? We deleted 4 lots, 18, 19, 20, and 21. Is this one of those 4 lots?
Yes, yeah, this is lot, maybe it's 18, maybe 19, I think. Okay. Like it was 18, which was the lot to the east of my lot above, and it's not built on, so it would be 19, I think.
Okay, I'm just wondering, Council recognizes the reasonableness of our concerns, and this is your letter, and in approving the DVP application, deleted the proposed lots 18 to 21. Is that not the case, or?
Yes, well, but the restrictive covenant went on all of the bank, yes. And however, there's 2 parts to the restrictive covenant. To the lot 17 to the west, there's a buffer along the top which varies, but nothing is to be touched. The second part of it is, and this is where the pegs have been put in at the bottom of the bank, is the restrictive covenant has a geotechnical report attached to it, and you're not supposed to build on these things in breach of that unless you go and get another geotechnical report that says, well, it's okay. That second part applies to these 4 lots, but not the buffer zone. Now, as far as I know, there hasn't been a second geotechnical opinion obtained on this lot. I think when the excavator went on, I don't even know that a building permit had been issued. So it just seems kind of loose to me, and I think everybody started out wanting to protect the bank, and that's what we're hoping we can now.
We do have a question for you from Councillor Patchy.
Thank you, Worship. More so to staff. I just need to have my memory refreshed. When Mr. McBride was here a couple of years ago, and some, if not all of us, went to the development below Garner Crescent, and I believe, if I recall this correctly, that lots 18, 19, 20, and 21 were dealt with under a development permit by, on your instigation, bringing them further to the front and lowering the height. Am I correct on that one?
I think it's the reverse. I think they were all in the development permit.
All right, so at that time, we dealt, and we also had a look at all the other lots, 17 going west. And I don't quite know how to put this, but I think you're a little late with this new request for doing geotechnical and doing other stuff. So my question to staff then is, what is the difference between what happened on lot 19, if that's what it is, and what was allowed to happen, if I gather correctly, And what is the difference between those 4 and Lot 17 and all those other lots west of that? How do you deal with that?
Mr. Siewert, go ahead.
Your Worship.
Do you understand the question?
Yes.
Okay.
So Lot 18 through 21 was originally in the development variance permit, and after discussions from the delegation and others that it was excluded. So there was not a height variance given on that, and there was also a setback variance for the front yards, I believe, at the time. So the issue of the bank protection was not dealt with those ones. It was dealt with from Lot 17 and further to the west. So those ones don't have the development variance permit registered on the title that talks about that protection. The second comment I'd like to make is just for clarification. There will be a geotechnical engineer on each of these properties. This one has a geotechnical engineer involved in it, different than the original engineer. So as part of the building permit process, we will require each lot to be engineered, and any bank stabilization the engineer recommends will be put in place.
Okay, thank you for that.
Councillor Kipp.
Yeah, thank you. This was the different way of calculating 42-foot height when we first did this one. I remember Councillor Besse's point. We brought all those houses out, kept them out of the bank because the bank was considered the soil composition and that was unstable. So we gave them, the developer, the ability to move the houses out. But then we removed some of it, of the covenant area you're saying, and it's just on these lots that we're talking about here?
Your Worship. Your Worship, without the details in front of us, I want to be careful with saying that one method is better than another method. What the applicant of the day brought forward was his solution for how he wanted to deal with the bank stability through house design. That does not mean that there's other ways that the banks could be stabilized or how it could be developed. That development variance permit was approved by council. How these lots develop, as Mr. Siewert said, will include geotechnical evaluations and will protect the bank, but will be a different building form than proposed on the lots with the development variance permit. So the houses may be back further into the bank. They may be using retaining walls that are separate from the house, which was part of the Hawthorne development proposal at the time. So it's not that one's better than the other. They're both reasonable solutions.
Okay. I see no further questions from council. Okay, second. All those in favor? Thank you, sir. Now we move into question period, agenda items only. I think there's a bit of a foot race on here. So far, Mr. Bullen's in the lead. Mr. Taylor's bringing up the rear. And
Ron Boland, 3165 King Richard Drive. I would like to get clarified the situation of approvals of the budget. There seemed to be something confusing about the original discussion. Is this the last time that budgets will be considered until next year?
No.
Will there be a
There will be a further one.
And there will be delegations on the budget for the next?
Yes.
Thank you. I wasn't clear on that.
Is that correct, Mr. Kenny? I just want to make sure that I'm just...
Yes, staff will be bringing forward recommendations to update the financial plan based on the year-end procedures, closing the year-end of 2011, and final assessment information that will come available in the next month or so. So probably sometime in April, staff will be bringing forward recommended changes to the financial plan.
Okay, thank you very much. In view of your change of mind on the Lindley Valley West reconsideration or report, could I ask that you consider, in any event, bringing Professor Curran to Nanaimo to discuss the law, hopefully in a public meeting, the law that deals with upzoning and downzoning of land and the values that are created and may be recovered in that case. I will not ask you to respond to that tonight, but I do hope you will keep it in mind. Similarly, I sent you all a note earlier today asking that you consider the utilization of the tens of thousands of dollars of video equipment available in this room to capture the proceedings of the FIPCOW meeting, which in many ways is one of broader community interest than this council meeting, which tends to deal with property issues, rezonings, and things that tend to be rather localized, where policy matters and budget matters are of interest to the community at large. I was hoping that someone might take some action on that tonight. I'm still waiting.
I think part of the issue may be that the council hasn't made a final decision on location. It may not be the Shaw Auditorium, but it may be in the building somewhere. It depends on whether or not how it's going to unfold. The final decision will be due at any time.
You'll excuse me, but if you read the minutes that are in tonight's agenda, it says that you have made a decision.
We've made a decision.
In this meeting until the boardroom is ready.
Yeah, but we may change.
You may change it, yes.
Council has that problem.
Yes, I understand that.
Thank you.
That can be changed.
I only say that in light of the fact that a number of questions arose today that may result in that happening. So I'm just saying it isn't etched in stone at this point that we'll always meet in this room. We may, but it's not finally determined.
Okay.
It's kind of like the budget.
One final question that is more or less rhetorical in nature. Do you realize that you're the first council in living memory of any councillor that I am aware of who has passed a budget, to date at least, that is larger than the budget that was presented by staff in the first place? And the consequences of that in a community like ours undergoing difficulties.
That's a valid rhetorical question. Well, it may be, but I think the thing is, too, you have to remember that what happens that when it's originally proposed, it started in the fall, and things change. We pointed out today at another meeting that I was at that we're regularly facing unexpected requests for more and more money, and some we can grant, some we can't. But to expect that there'll be no change in the budget as the months flow, I don't know is totally realistic.
No, I'm merely making a historical statement that this has never happened before in the living memory of any councillor member to whom I've spoken.
Okay, thank you, sir.
It's always gone, it has changed, but it's gone the other way.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah, hi, my name is Chris Stewart, and I think I have some questions that are agenda-related items. With regards to the Lindley Valley, I've looked at a map of Nanaimo, an overhead map, and it does look like an area where some green space would be appropriate. And if the developer is not willing to allow for some green space there, then perhaps some of the $65 million allocated for the water treatment upgrade agenda could be instead put into acquisition of the Lindley Valley land from the property owner. And I'm also concerned about the city planning's rental suite policy. I'm just wondering if there's an agenda to eliminate private homeowners with rental suites for some reason.
No, I would say the reverse. We've legalized secondary suites, if that's your question.
Yeah.
So we're trying to provide the opportunity for more people. So it's quite the reverse.
Also, and I have a petition here that I'd like to present to a councillor and to the mayor to terminate the city's contract with the United Nations Agency International Council for the Local Environmental Initiatives, who are putting on these Your Voice, Our Nanaimo programs around the world. And I have some information here accompanying if you want to find out why.
Okay, this is on tonight's agenda, is it? What you're dealing with now is question period, and the question period is specifically related to agenda items only. So if you bring up something that's not on tonight's agenda.
Yeah, I don't know if that was on the agenda, but
Okay.
I know that
Yes, it is.
I know that there's all this week there will be the Year of Voice Hour and Nanaimo thing going on, and I have some.
That's actually going to go up for the next 6 months.
6 months.
Yeah.
And I have a petition and some information here about that because I'm concerned about the Agenda 21 sustainable development, which is being implemented through municipalities all over the world, whose actual objectives are hiding behind a green mask. And I would like to spread some awareness about what the whole sustainable development is actually all about. And I got some information about that if I could present that.
What you could do, what I would suggest you is come to the very first meeting. I mean, what we're talking about is strategic planning. That's what we're doing, and that's what this whole, Your Voice, Our Nanaimo was all about. It's got nothing to do with the United Nations. It's a strategic plan we're developing for our people here in Nanaimo.
Yeah, I know that's the official story, but I have some information here that would shed some light on this
Mr. Chair,
fallacy.
point of order. It's question period. Do you have a question for council?
Yeah, I was wondering if you'd be interested on accepting my petition and this information and have a look at it, because it's a very serious matter that
Mr.
I'm
Lindsay would be more than pleased to
very
look after
concerned
that.
about.
Sure. Leave it with Mr. Lindsay behind you there.
Fred Taylor, 204 Emery Way. I would like to ask, in developing a transportation plan, it didn't seem, or I stand to be corrected, that a study of traffic generators would be undertaken. It seemed to be more of questioning people coming in from the Lanceville area, etc., and possibly where they're going. But traffic generators, in my opinion, are the key. They govern your transportation plan, routes, etc. Like transportation generators are the college, the hospital, shopping centers. They all played, that was the initial role in developing where your Nanaimo Parkway got located and main arteries to those generators. And I didn't hear anything in the conversation of looking at these generators in the city. I'm just wondering if the committee would.
Well, maybe Mr. Hickey could shed some light on it. Mr. Hickey?
Mayor Ratan, yes, in answer to Mr. Taylor's question, in doing those surveys where we're talking to people about where they go to and from, we'll be able to understand some of those trip generators, and also when we measure traffic that go through the different areas of the community, we'll have a better sense of who's traveling from what sections out of town into our community and within the community itself.
And a follow-up question to that, would that also include, say, relocation of the bus depot to the downtown area?
Well, that would be done in consultation with the RDN, of course, because...
well, yeah, but that's the city...
We would look at it. I think you know, Mr. Taylor, there's some challenges with the location where it is now, and we've looked at different sites downtown. I think a lot of us would feel there's a better location than presently being used, and accessing it is a challenge.
In my opinion, downtown where stores seem to be appearing empty more and more, you need the people down there.
Yeah, no, I agree.
And the bus is taking them down there is, to me, the first step. And the last question is, and I've sort of heard an answer from a staff member, but just recently, within the last 10 days or so, we read the city getting a large traffic fine funding from the province, which would give us 5 more officers. Well, if they're going to raise the rate, maybe they shouldn't get the 5 officers. We need the money to pay the higher rates if that's the case.
Yeah, it's a challenge. The council has had the policy of taking the fine money, it's in excess of $1 million, and applying it against the overhead of the RCMP. But the point's taken. I mean, we need to sit down.
The overhead.
Yeah. Before you go, Councillor Anderson has a question.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I just wanted to clarify for you, we had a Transportation Advisory Committee meeting a couple of weeks ago, and the exact topic of moving the current bus depot was actually discussed, and it's something that could be considered in the Transportation Master Plan.
So you see, we're still thinking about it.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
Janet Irvine, 609 First Street, Nanaimo. My first question relates to the fact that a majority of you voted in favor of taxpayers contributing up to $3,000 annually towards legal fees incurred in the event of a conflict of interest allegation situation. I'm wondering when there's the I'm wondering about if an orientation of newly elected councillors actually takes place, does it include any information for them on the topic of conflict of interest?
Okay, just for clarification, am I missing this? Was this on the agenda earlier?
It's included, I'm sorry, it's included in the financial, okay, could you please clarify? I'll ask you a question, if I may. Mr. Chair, could you clarify, as I understand it, this extra increase was an extra increase to the budget?
Yeah.
And so, first of all, I guess it would help if I was clear on that.
Okay.
So it is, to answer your question, that's included in the 5-year financial plan, is it not?
It's my understanding that it is, and are you?
Your Worship, as we talked about earlier, there will be another a final financial plan, a bylaw amendment brought forward, and that's the type of item that will be reviewed to make sure that there is adequate funding to provide for that policy.
Yeah. Was the question why we're doing it? Or, I'm not sure I understand the reason you asked. What is it you're asking? I'm sorry.
First of all, it is on the agenda. It's included in the 5-year
No, I'm not questioning that. I'm asking, what was your question? Do you want to know why we voted for it? Is that the 3,000?
No.
Okay.
Orientation.
If you'll give me a chance, I will clarify and explain to you again, please. In the orientation of newly elected councillors, and I guess, please, I'll ask this through the chair to staff. Thank you.
Your Worship, if the question is, was there conflict of interest orientation provided during the new council orientation, the answer is yes.
And my second question related to that topic. I'm asking this really in the interest of making life easier for all elected officials, as well as in the interests of the entire community. It becomes so controversial, and it does nothing positive for the image of the entire community as far as I'm concerned. So I'm also wondering, I am aware, and I have been aware for a long time, that Nanaimo, the city of Nanaimo, has its own conflict of interest policy that dates back to 1988. And this policy also pertains to members of committees of council who do make recommendations to council. And it also appears to hold council members to a higher standard than the community charter provisions do. And I'm wondering why it's so difficult to observe and comply with that policy. I don't think it should have to become so controversial and confusing and all the rest of it. So is it recognized or is it not recognized? I guess that's my simple question. Is it practiced?
Your Worship, the delegation is correct that the 1988 policy exists and was actually part of the orientation materials. But I don't think there's any way that single policy can distill the complexities that are a conflict of interest that are faced by councils in British Columbia.
I'm sorry, I did have a problem hearing the end of what your answer was.
Your Worship, just agreeing that the conflict of interest policy the delegation refers to exists and was part of the orientation materials, and that I just provided the comment that I don't believe that any policy, this one or anyone like it, could possibly distill down into a simple way of orienting whether or not you are in conflict or not in a given set of circumstances. The status of the law is just too complex.
We've got a couple of questions. Would you have a minute there? Councillor Greaves, did you have something you wanted to raise?
No, I was going to answer
Councillor
something a while back there. I can't remember what it was.
Being one of the councillors, I did attend all the orientation sessions that were provided, in addition to which Councillor Bestwick and Anderson and myself went to Vancouver for the Local Government Leaders Academy Conference. And there was an afternoon session on conflict. And one of the lawyers that was giving the discussion gave about a half a dozen examples up on a screen. And of the 40 people that were in the room, not once during that discussion was there agreement on the examples that were given as to whether that person was or wasn't in conflict. One little ingredient will change the complexion of the question. It's very, very convoluted. In years past, the provincial government conflict commissioner's office used to look after municipal conflict issues, but because they no longer had the resources available to them, like many other things, they dropped municipal council's conflict questions. So we're left to do it on our own. This is just one mechanism of replacing that item that we used to be able to refer to. So it's very, very convoluted. It's very difficult. One small, minor little additional item can change the whole opinion, and we'll never know, even with this current provision that we've put in place, we'll never know whether we are or we aren't unless a judge were to oversee it.
Okay, now we have a comment from Councillor Brennan here for you.
I just wanted to remark that the law on conflict is really complex, which is, an easy thing to say. But the other thing I need to say is that the law on conflict is evolving all the time. There's questions taken to court and new decisions made, new law on the question of conflict. So some questions can be really easy. I'm working for, shopkeeper A. Shopkeepers A problem comes in front of the council. I'm in a conflict. I won't be there. But there's other times when it's less clear. Like, for instance, there was a delegation that came forward one night to complain about a subdivision. Well, that delegation, the proponents, was headed by my family physician. Now, this guy has been my physician for 30 years now. I felt that there would be an apprehension of bias. I thought that I was probably biased in that. So I excused myself. Mm-hmm. I was later told by a lawyer that I had just been a chicken and that I was just trying to duck it. So, and you apparently agree with that.
No, so, when you're finished, I do have a response.
So I think that it is so broad now, it's so complex, that when you do find a question where you're just not sure, then you should be able to take that certain set of facts and get a legal opinion, because it's a question of law. As much as it's a question of ethics, it's a question of law.
Okay, well, we've got Councillor Bestwick now. We've got a whole pile of questions for you here, so don't rush into it here. Councillor Bestwick.
Thank you, Bishop. This is a really personal, for me, experience to have gone through, and it's not as necessarily as simple as we would like to think that it is. And I certainly learned that. And some of the things that I learned is interesting, real or perceived And perceived is really a pretty broad statement that you need to protect against perception. And if, in my particular case, I didn't think that I was, so I defended my position. And through defending my position from a perceived anonymous complainant, drew a tremendous amount of interest to something that was still pretty gray and muddy to me. And so I think it's really important that members of council and the mayor have some form of protection, if you will, when it comes to this particular topic. Because I can tell you, the things that I have done in this community, somebody could probably perceive that I'm in some sort of conflict on practically everything that I vote on since I've been in council for 6 or 7 years. And so if you drill down deep enough, I'm probably connected to a lot of things somewhere along the way. I would never knowingly or willingly stay in if I thought, and I can tell you that I had 3 official legal opinions that said I wasn't. So I defended myself, and to the chagrin of many, and more than anybody, myself. So it's a real difficult one, let me tell you. It's not easy.
Councillor Johnstone.
Just quickly, Your Worship, and Mrs. Irvine, you asked the question because of the budget tonight, and is the $27,000 in the budget? And I know there's people out there that are thinking that each of us councillors have had another $3,000, this is factual, that they think our salaries have all been increased by $3,000 so we can draw on that money if we need to, which is not the case, and I think we need to clarify that. There may be none of that money used during the course of this year, so it's just a precautionary.
I understand that very clearly. Thank you.
Councillor Anderson, you're on.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And as the only member of council who opposed this, I'm just going to give you a little rationale, as I did at the Finance Policy Committee of the whole meeting. I disagree with my fellow members of council in regards to this motion. Someone didn't want to hear me talk about ducks, but I'm going to talk about ducks, and if it looks like a duck and it walks like a duck and it sounds like a duck, it most likely is a duck. But one of the things I do want to say is that I spoke to CBC Radio this afternoon in regards to this, and I think this is one of the reasons why our provincial government needs to step up and actually make the legislation more clear. So I'm in favor of that, and I think that's something that municipalities across British Columbia should be making sure that the provincial government makes the conflict of interest rules or legislation more clear.
Yes, that's what I suggested to you in my communication to you. And I see where there's a lot of issues that are governed by the community charter, and there's lots of room for amendment to that charter, because I think we end up running into problems because of it. And I'm not sure, Your Worship, when Councillor Brennan did her explanation to me, and she gave me the example of her doctor, her physician, well, I would clearly know that that is not a conflict of interest. Like, I think everybody's getting really paranoid, thinking about bias. But if they really were given a proper orientation and understood the policy, when you say it's changing, well, does that not mean that what society finds acceptable is changing in the field of ethics? Because it is really. That is the field that it lies in, is ethics. Yeah. Anyway, I just want to clarify that. Thank you for your explanation. And I just have one final question, please. And this pertains to an item in the 5-year financial plan. And I'm looking at the executive summary that was a part of that plan, and this relates to your decision to hire a full-time communications specialist. I do understand that obviously one thing they will do is expand the use of social media, but I also feel very strongly that as it is the elected officials that make the decisions that affect everyone's life and make the policy and vote, that it certainly doesn't take the place of face-to-face contact. And as a matter of fact, in all levels of politics these days, it seems that the use of social media is getting people into trouble. So my question, which I asked two councillors, and unfortunately I did not get a direct answer, which disappointed me. So my question is, it's from the executive summary of the five-year financial plan, where it was stated that in the absence of this position, staff has recently structured a new staff communications committee that utilizes existing personnel resources from throughout the organization to tackle corporate communications. And then, so it was actually an initiative. I'm not sure if it was set up by staff. And I'm just wondering if if it was put into practice, and if the effectiveness of the initiative was assessed. And I'll put this question to whoever is able to answer. Thank you.
Your Worship, I can answer it. Yes, the committee was put into place and is in place and is still operating. One of the conclusions, though, that we have reached is that even with the committee operating, I think it's done a lot of good things, but we do I do believe that we are short sufficient resources internally to provide the level of communication expertise that Council is seeking.
Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Matthew O'Donnell, Nanaimo, British Columbia. My question is for Councillor Brennan, Councillor Bestwick, Councillor Johnstone, Councillor Anderson, and Councillor McKay. Considering in regards to the Lindley Valley vote, you voted one way 2 weeks ago, you voted a different way tonight. What specifically, not vaguely, but specifically led to changing your mind? And another question on top of that, how do you think you're looking to the voting public when you're making a vote 2 weeks ago, apparently based off of just giddiness, and changing your mind 2 weeks later?
Well, you have to remember that there is additional information that's received throughout the time, and one of the most important things, and whenever we go to a public hearing, it's absolutely essential, is that Council demonstrates the ability to listen to advice and hear from people, and has the right to change their mind until the final issue, and it's not uncommon that several times people may have different views as more information comes in. But anyway, we've got three answers for you from Councillor Johnson, Councillor Bestwick, Councillor Brennan. Councillor Johnson.
Thank you. I'm pleased to give you my reasons. I made a motion, an amendment to the motion 2 weeks ago to ask the owner of the property if the property was for sale, because I thought we were putting the cart before the horse. Why even contemplate buying looking at such an acquisition if the property is indeed not for sale? That was why I made that amendment to the motion. The property is not for sale. The developer is looking at ways of improving the tax base for all of our citizens by selling it and developing it in an environmental and sustainable way. So that was exactly why I changed my mind.
Councillor Bestwick.
Thank you, Bishop. To address your three questions, specifically process, is what I felt that the basis of what I needed to undertake to change my mind, which I did. Being responsible and accepting the fact that I thought that I made a mistake, So I think it's okay to admit that you made a mistake. So I did. And the third thing is it doesn't prevent us from still continuing to have these discussions and opportunities and encouraging the awareness factor for the balance between environment and economics. And I think that those conversations since the time that we made that motion have been good ones. And I think that we will continue to have those same conversations to everyone's benefit. That's why.
Councillor Brennan.
Well, Matthew, I would expect that people would see me as being thoughtful, that I consider things, that I can recognize when I've made a mistake. And as for how I think the voting public might see that, quite frankly, I don't make decisions based on popularity or whether I might get elected next time or whether this is going to, hamper my ability to be a vote getter. I make decisions based on what I think is the correct reasoning. And in that case, I thought I made a mistake. So tonight I rectified that.
Thank you. Councillor Anderson.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And I have to agree with the fellow councillors who have spoken so far, is that we have to be willing to listen to new information, and when we hear new information, perhaps we've made a mistake, we should know that it's not the best thing to do, and that perhaps changing our mind is the best thing to do. And in this case, the same as Councillor Brennan, I didn't run to try to be popular. I'm here to try and do what's right. And so it's my hope that people will respect my decision. And this and that, I spoke to many people after the decision was made, and I feel now that it was the incorrect decision, especially speaking with staff and members of the community. So I think people would appreciate that from the information that I've learned, that I'm willing to change my mind if it's in regard to something that can make a huge impact to a negative impact to the community in that way, and that's why I changed my mind on this one.
Thank you. Councillor McKay.
Thank you, Your Worship. To the delegation, there's not any one of those three items in there that we cannot continue to pursue. That's it.
Okay, thank you very much. I still, with the exception of Councillor Johnstone, and Councillor Anderson, I still really I heard about new information, but I still really didn't get any specifics as to what that new information was. Is that in camera, or is that like publicly available?
Yeah.
Or?
Well, I think, Matthew, everyone would answer the question to the best of their ability and the way they feel. We're not going to debate.
No problem.
Thank you.
Motion to adjourn.
Seconded. We stand adjourned. Thank you.